Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of What If Naruto Take Control of Gotham. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no more time. Let's start the story.
Batman hid high in one of the old trees in Gotham's oldest and largest park, watching through his advanced binoculars what was happening in the distance. A sizable group of men and women, some wearing red ceremonial robes, were gathered in the distance, all wearing white shirts and pants. After being hurt the previous evening, Barbara said, "Be careful, Bruce," over his communicator back at the Batcave. This is Gotham's newest gang and cult. They call themselves the Order of the Ninth. Information on them is sketchy at best, but apparently they've been around for quite some time, just not in such large numbers. Batman thought, so something has them recruiting. As he focused on the group, a few robed figures patrolled the area, looking around covertly, their guns in the folds of their garments. When a cultist moved enough for his robe to flap slightly, revealing his weapon, he stopped to observe what they were. "Some of them have guns," he said. "One is armed with an M16 assault rifle." When the girl saw the photo he sent her via the cowl cam, she said, "These guys aren't playing around." However, it does lead us in the right direction because the prior killings were carried out using powerful weapons and 5.56 by 45mm ammunition. The robed figures were left standing as the group started to retreat and kneel to the ground. It was then revealed that there were 8 of them, one of whom was dressed in a set of black robes with exquisite red trim and a hood covering his face. Batman stepped closer so he could use his tiny directional microphone to hear them more clearly. "Brothers, sisters, for too long has our Lord and Master been trapped, for too long have we, his humble servants, been without our Master's true presence while he waited in the hellish prison that the fools of old placed him in." The hooded individual addressed the assembled crowd. "For years we have searched the darkest, deepest corners of the globe in search of the key to his release. But no longer, for I have found the key to releasing our Master, and in return for my unwavering devotion, he has seen fit to bless me with this power." Below him, a huge spiral burned into the ground about 10 feet wide, as the man threw out his palms, causing the ground around them to briefly burst into flames before smothering them out. "A metahuman?" Batman whispered to himself. "Not anything recently, he could be one of the metahumans that hide their powers," he said as he heard Barbara typing on the keyboard. The group kneeling close to the now burned spiral did not flinch. Instead, they watched him intently, as though they had seen such things before. The man shouted, "Today, by fellow followers of the Ninth, we will unleash our Master so that he may once again rise and bless us for our service." As the 8 came closer, pulling big broadswords from their robe folds, they lowered themselves to their knees as one of them picked up a big container of what appeared to be red paint, then sank the blades into the ground just a few inches outside the charred spiral. The robed figure swiftly and expertly repositioned itself behind the sword and drew a pentagram over the spiral. In a chant-like voice, the main cultist exclaimed, "With the blood of the innocent, we mark our Lord's passage into this realm." Batman's eyes narrowed. They were being accused of killing a young girl, killing her without causing any pain, and then removing her blood from her body. A pair of eyes floating inside a glass jar filled with sickly bloody water was placed on one of the 5 points by another red-robed cultist who stood up. "With the eyes of a child, we give our Master sight to see the passage onto this world." Batman linked it to another case once more, this time involving a dead youngster who was discovered with his eyes removed. The boy was not even a year old. The third rose and placed a big vial of white powder on a different point. "Powdered human bones, to strengthen our king for his transition." This time, a man was discovered with several missing bones, and his flesh had been cut and peeled off to access them. A human skull was placed on a point by a fourth. "The skull of a killer, to show our Lord that we are truly devoted." One of the most horrifying was when some passing teenagers discovered a headless body in the middle of an alley. However, upon closer examination, they discovered that his eyes and brain matter had been thrown into a dumpster along with the majority of his facial skin. The fifth unwrapped a bloody cloth several times before revealing a human heart. The human heart, what we completely serve with. A significant amount of the deceased woman's chest was missing, and it took some time for the examiners to discover that her heart was the only organ missing. The rest of her organs were still present but strewn all over the floor. Finally, the next man stood up, pulled out a sharp dagger, and extended his arm. The 2 heroes would never forget the image of him silently cutting through his wrist and grunting to sever it. "The flesh of the servant, proof that we will suffer or die in his name." Are they insane? Do they really believe that this'll work at all? Barbara asked as they observed what was taking place. "It doesn't matter if it'll work or not, as long as they believe that it will, then they will continue to try," Batman responded. As the last 2 people stood, the 6 people who had placed something on the pentagram, a euro, including the person who had drawn Ida Euro. started chanting in a low voice while the other went up to the leader and leaned forward. The first walked into the pentagram. From his robes, the leader took a small wooden case and opened it, carefully removing a thumb-sized bluish-green jewel that was strung on a black cord like a necklace, with the necklace around his neck and over his head. The hooded cultist pulled off the hood to show the world his bald head. The other cultist reached up and lowered the robe's hood as the other's chanting became louder, revealing that she was a young woman of about 19 or 20 years old then. To the surprise of the two heroes, she unrolled her robes and showed them that she was naked beneath them. Before the pentagram started to glow and emit smoke, the bald man and she stood in the middle, backs to one another. Everything froze with a blinding flash and a deafening bang. The young girl was suddenly naked and bare as she stood in a huge, dark emptiness. She quickly leaned back and felt herself bump into someone, though, so it didn't bother her. She turned to see the back of a muscular, shirtless man with spiked blonde hair, not the bald man who had entered the pentagram with her. After slowly turning to face her, the man smirked as he gazed down at her nude body with soul-stealing blue eyes above whiskered cheeks. He appeared to be a year or two older than she was, and he was slightly taller, but it was the jewel of the ninth, the one around his neck, that drew her eye. She squeaked out, "Master," because this man started to radiate a red aura of unadulterated primordial strength. She leaned into it as the blonde touched her cheek and said, "Yes, my servant." His aura surrounded her like a lover's embrace, making her feel as though she was melting. She exhaled sharply and said, "Master, it's such an honor to be in your presence." The blonde merely gave the woman a smile. The girl became dizzy and lightheaded, which embarrassed her. Was his touch alone going to make her faint? As the sensation persisted, she abruptly noticed that her legs were starting to shake and her heart was starting to beat more slowly. The girl whispered, What's happening to me?" and soon discovered that the blonde who was her lord was holding her up entirely. "Master." "What's?" she said, seeing a savage glint form in his eyes as they flushed. As she drooped and hung from his arm like a rag doll, she lost all of her strength and was almost unconscious. She was not even able to finish her question. "Sleep, my servant," she was told. "Your part is almost finished. Soon your life force will complete my resurrection." She whispered, but before passing out entirely in his arms. "Shish," he murmured. "Hush now, your part is over. Now is the time for my return." The blonde leaned over and gave her a gentle peck on the lips before laying her down in the empty space. "You have earned your eternal rest, now pass on." His words caused the body to begin to heat up, then catch fire and turn to ash. "Shatter the chains of bondage and release me onto the world of humans," he roared out, making the void around him tremble and parts of the darkness crack like glass as the man gradually started to glow, lighting up the lightless void and throwing his head back. "Bijou bomb!" the blonde exclaimed as he took a deep breath and felt his lungs expand just before a huge, pulsating crimson orb began to form over his open mouth. His long-term prison was totally destroyed by the wave of power that exploded outward towards the fissures above him. Batman grunted as the explosion's shockwave knocked him from the tree he was crouching in. He felt himself fall to the ground and decided to buy some shock absorbers for his suit. The cultists fared no better. Being nearer the explosion, the majority had been killed when the pressure or shockwave liquefied or severely damaged their internal organs. The blast atomized every cult member in red robes, leaving behind tiny bits of clothing and body, and their swords melted on the ground. Coughing and hacking up blood, the cult leader lay on the ground, suffering internal damage like the recruits. However, he gave a weak, bloody smile as the smoke cleared, and then he attempted to crawl in the direction of the figure. He groaned, choking on some blood and hacking it out onto the ground. "My lord," he said, "Master." When the shadowed figure heard this, it turned and moved slowly in the direction of the man, exposing the blonde with blue eyes and cheek scars that resembled whiskers. The blonde asked, "Are you the one I have to thank for releasing me of my bonds?" But received a feeble nod. The blonde reached down and roughly grabbed the man his neck. "You are the one who dares parade around as one who received my blessing, using your parlor tricks to inspire fear and loyalty. I've seen what you've done. Using my image and name to further your own perverse satisfactions. My necklace allowed me to see the world around it, and I've watched as you sullied my name to have your way with the women you bring into the cult." The blonde clamped down harder on the leader's windpipe, choking him. As he bent forward to whisper in the dying man's ear, he continued, ignoring the blood that spilled on his hand, "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Remember it as you burn. You have outlived your usefulness. You and these ignorant, mindless sheep. I have no need for one such as you, nor a group of fools in need of daily instructions." Bruce Wayne, seated in the Batcave beneath his mansion, combed through his databases to find information about the Order of the Ninth, or at least what was once the Order. Every cultist in the forest had been discovered dead, Their organs either atomized from being so close or ruptured by the blast. The truth about what actually happened caused a media frenzy, and more than 30 bodies had been recovered. One night, after calling him with the big bat symbol that illuminated the sky whenever a crisis occurred, Commissioner Gordon even asked him about it. He shared his knowledge with the man and even gave him some files that the police did not yet have. New hints about what transpired were revealed by additional investigation into the case and cite terrifying hints. Despite suffering severe injuries from the explosion, the cult leader had not perished from his wounds like the others. No. The autopsy verified that the victim's neck was broken, and the hand-shaped bruise that had developed was the cause of death. It was a terrifying thought. Has their Lord really been able to return? Since he had become involved with Ra's al Ghul and was aware of the Lazarus Pit, a secret that the man used to survive for more than 600 years, he wasn't one of those people who dismissed the paranormal but calling it forth with offerings of human flesh and bone and a pentagram? A set of claw marks carved into a few trees formed a tiny trail that led to Gotham, which was another clue discovered that indicated their success. An unidentified entity wandering around and possibly causing trouble was exactly what they needed. With crazy people like the Joker wandering around, wasn't Gotham already terrible enough? The blonde, still dressed in the red robes that the cultist who had sacrificed his body for him had given him, thought, what a strange new world, as he made his way through some dim alleyways. The cultist's body had been reduced to its most basic components by the ritual that had given him new life and released him from prison, and then he had reverted to his previous form. Still wearing his necklace and robes, the young woman served a similar purpose. He only needed to use her to restructure his chakra pathways because modern humans have forgotten the traditional methods. His strong bond with the jewel around his neck allowed him to see the outside world and learn a few things about the new world, so fortunately, not everything was unfamiliar and strange to him. He hadn't really ventured out into the city, though, until now. He spent a few days in the forest to allow his enormous energy reserves and chakra to refuel because being reborn consumed a lot of his energy. He heard someone say, "Hey, look here boys, we got us a faggot wearing a dress," just before the alley erupted in a cacophonous chorus of laughter. He turned to see 5 men laughing at him, the majority of whom were carrying bottles of what appeared to be alcohol. One shouted, "What, looking for a dick to suck, fag?" Naruto raised an eyebrow, glanced at the robes he was still wearing, then narrowed his eyes and said, "I am quite secure in my sexual orientation." You 5 questioned it while standing around drinking. "I haven't seen the hide nor hair of a female around here, so who's to say that you aren't in fact the fags?" "What you say?" shouted the man. Naruto sneered and went on, "Not only are you sexually lost, but you are also deaf. What a sad little pathetic man you are. I'll kill you, bitch." Naruto did not flinch as the blade dug deep into his side as he watched the man dash forward and retrieve a pocket knife from his pants. The man and his friends stared at him in disbelief as he asked, "Is that it?" With a little squelch, he reached down and took the knife from the man's hand, then crushed it, shattering all the bones in his assailant's hand and causing him to scream. "Ah, let me go, you." The man began to scream, but Naruto killed him by grabbing the knife-wielding hand and driving the blade into his head. He killed Grant," exclaimed one of the 4 men who were left. "Yes, and you're next," Naruto said, smirking at them as he threw the body aside. A few minutes later, Naruto emerged from the alley wearing a leather jacket, black sneakers he had removed from one of the now dead men, and jeans that were a little too big. He brushed off his sleeves and scoffed lowly. "Humans, to think that they'd fall so low. Time has made them weak," he said. From the darkness came a voice that said, "Do not make such assumptions just yet, not everyone is like them." Naruto turned and looked at the man he had discovered standing a short distance away. "I was beginning to wonder when you might reveal yourself." The man had black hair with white streaks on either side of his widow's peak, and he was tanned. His beard was a little odd, with hair growing on either side but not in the center of his chin, and his eyes were encircled by a thick, dark ring under a green overcoat with gold trim that sat over his shoulders because his arms weren't in the sleeves. The man wore a pricey green suit with a red tie. A bigger, muscular bald man in dark purple pants designed for desert conditions and a black vest stood behind him. "So you've noticed me," the man thought. "I shouldn't be surprised. I've heard the legends before as a child." "Is that so?" "Yes, the legends of a great yet terrible beast, a force of nature in its own right, a being powerful enough to crush mountains and cause tidal waves with ease. I've heard rumors that they were trying to raise you from your prison," the man said prior to coming forward. "But where are my manners? My name is Ra's al Ghul and it's a pleasure to meet you, Kyuubi." "My name is Naruto," Naruto said, interrupting him, causing the bigger man behind Ra's to glare at him. "Kyuubi is merely a title." The man snarled menacingly behind Ra's al Ghul, "Do not interrupt, infidel." Know your place. Naruto growled back, his eyes glimmering red as each tooth in his mouth appeared to split into razor-sharp fangs. While his master Roz took it in stride, he recoiled at the demonic growl. He turned his head slightly to the man behind him before turning back to Naruto. Enough, Yubu, Roz said. Forgive my servant, he feels that no one should disrespect me, he said. It does not matter, he is your dog, so keep him on a leash, Naruto said, his eyes and teeth returning to their usual state. I'll keep that in mind, but on to the reason why I'm here. I wish to make a deal with you, Roz said, merely laughing a little. Really, and what kind of deal? The kind that you will find beneficial to both of us, I assure you, Roz replied. But I'd rather not talk about it in the middle of the streets of Gotham. I have a limo waiting around the corner that we can talk in. He agreed after giving it some thought, and the two started to walk as though they had been friends for ages, with Yubu, Roz's bodyguard and manservant for Al Ghul, following. He was a few steps ahead of the other man as he turned the corner, and Yubu leapt in front of him and attempted to palm thrust him in the chest. While the man bit his lip to contain his screams, Naruto grabbed it with one hand and glared before bending Yubu's middle finger back and snapping the bone out of its joint until his fingernail touched his own wrist. Try it again and you shall see what it's like to be slowly burnt to ash, Naruto said. At last, Yubu regained his hand and gripped it tightly, causing the bone to pop back into its joint. After a moment, he got up and opened the door for Naruto and his master, avoiding the blonde's gaze. Then he went inside and sat down next to Roz Al Ghul, with Naruto on the other side. After instructing his driver to get behind the wheel, Roz Al Ghul cleared his throat and started to explain. I have lived for well over 600 years. This is all thanks to the Lazarus Pits. I'm sure you know of them. The brunette nodded. Indeed I have. Large hidden stores of arcane chemicals with the power to revive those who are near death at the cost of temporary but devastating insanity. Yes, then you should know that once used, that Lazarus Pit is no longer able to heal someone and is useless, but we uncovered an ancient scroll that has led us to believe that there is a way to change that, but as fate would have it, the scroll was a set of two and we only had the first after years of searching. We finally found the second, which revealed that one of the great 9 demon lords could effectively change it permanently. It took Naruto a minute to think about it, and then he looked at Roz. I guess I could do so if I remember correctly. It was the Hachibi that first did so in hopes of creating a fountain of youth to best me. But what would I get in return for this deed? I control a vast, global organization in return for aiding me. I will return the favor and aid you whenever you require it, but for now I offer you sanctuary in my desert base where I shall provide you with all the information you will need as to live in this time. Naruto pondered the information, blinking at it. In addition to the informational offer, he would benefit greatly from having a strong ally in this new era. After spending so much time in prison, he had no idea how the world had changed. The only indication that he was in Gotham was a sign that said so. Naruto quickly found himself boarding a private jet owned by Roz Al Ghul after agreeing to help the man. The airport security had been bought off or blackmailed into ignoring their extra passenger, so he got on with little trouble. The control tower quickly granted the pilots permission to take off, and they were in the air. To put it mildly, the next 10 hours were quiet other than the flight crew. No one else was present, and occasionally Roz Al Ghul spoke to him. Yubu was afraid to even look him in the eye. However, he had had plenty of time to reflect during the flight, something he had done almost constantly during his previous incarceration. However, as before, he discovered that his mind went blank when he attempted to think of what he would do now that he was free. He had initially considered enslaving humanity, carrying out mass murders in retaliation, and other such ideas, but after many years he simply lost interest. He had only ever known that black emptiness, his prison, and now that he was free again, it felt a little unreal. When the plane finally touched down, Naruto got off and surveyed the wide sand and sun that greeted him below them. A group of armed men and a beautiful woman stood close to a few cars like the others. She was tanned, had long, raven-colored hair that covered one side of her face, and icy blue eyes. I would like to introduce to you a Mr. Naruto, the nine-tailed fox of legend, said Roz Al Ghul, calling out to the girl as he stepped onto the sand where she was standing and forcing her to approach. Naruto, let me introduce my daughter, Talia Al Ghul, she said, turning to face Naruto, who had also stepped down onto the sand. 'Tis a pleasure, the girl said, bowing slightly in deference. Naruto said, indeed it did, and then he grinned to himself. Talia wore a long skirt with a V all the way up her thigh and a tan shirt that exposed her midriff. He was aware of his goals, or even better, who. As the blonde entered the stone castle in the middle of the Sahara Desert from what she claimed was training, Roz Al Ghul said, Ah, Naruto, just who I was hoping to see. The man actually didn't know what the blonde creature did outside in the hot sun, and he didn't dare send someone to spy on him to find out. My men have returned with another piece that you require. As he approached the man, Naruto nodded and said, "Good, then we have only one final preparation to make before the process can begin." Naruto was wearing a tank top and loose pants due to the heat. The man asked, "And what is that?" With a hint of excitement at the prospect of turning the Lazarus pit beneath the castle into a permeable pool, think of it as a fountain of youth. "Tell me this, have you heard tales of the Scroll of Osiris?" Naruto asked, slightly smirking at the man. Nodded. "I have one half of it myself and searched for years to locate the other missing half. It is a map to the Egyptian queen Thoth Khepera and holds knowledge of the powers of the gods. For the ritual, I require both," Roz said, "but the other half is missing. I have no idea where it is." Naruto did not say anything. "Tell me, Roz al Ghul, the jewel upon my neck, doesn't it seem rather familiar?" As the blonde nodded his head, "There was a reason that my former cult took so long to release me. This jewel was hidden away with the bodies of those whom imprisoned me, but was stolen by grave robbers whom sold it. It circled the globe many times until it came to rest with a young servant to a royal mystic. Her name was Thoth Khepera." Ra Euros al Ghul just listened to the man as he talked, engrossed in the tale mainly due to his fixation on locating the queen's tomb. "Due to my rather close connection with it, I have been able to see its surroundings. Her employment was abusive to say the least, and I've watched her be brutally violated by her master more than once for the simplest of mistakes. But one evening, after a harsher punishment than usual, she found that her broken, abused, and raped little body coursing with power and healing before her eyes. She had tapped into my necklace's power with my blessing. Of course, the next morning, in front of the royal court, she killed her tormentor using my power and was hailed a god in human form." Naruto stopped speaking. "But now is not the time for a history lesson. The point is, the two halves of the scroll contain the final instructions. I personally never did this, but she kept detailed information on how she did this very thing. But I digress. Before the cult stole my necklace, it was being studied by researchers whom located her old chambers. Inside was the missing half. Last I saw of it, it was being shipped away to Gotham." He said to the blonde, "I shall have my men get it," and then hurried off, his suit now consisting of a shirt and cooler pants, his overcoat swapped out for a green cape. Naruto followed suit, making his way through the castle before coming to a halt outside the room that Raz al Ghul had given him. He abruptly said, "One should not try to sneak up on what could kill you," as he turned quickly and grasped the weapon that a woman was holding. Still as observant as ever, the attacker, who turned out to be Talia, said. Naruto let go of her weapon, a unique crossbow that resembled a pistol, and he and the girl went into his room. She muttered, "I see that someone was busy," as she peered at his opulent bed, which was fit for a sultan. Her father had gone to great lengths to ensure his comfort, even hiring 2 concubines to look after him at night when he felt ill, as one had stated. Stressed, the 2 concubines who were still sleeping on his bed were visible to everyone naked. The first was a dark-skinned beauty with curly black hair and big breasts, and the second was a pale blonde woman who was taller than the first but had small C-cups and a smaller rear. "I've been without the touch of a woman for so long. Surely you aren't going to start complaining after what we did not long ago." She would have blushed if her father hadn't trained her so well. "Of course not. You're the only man here not too afraid of my father to try and bed me." With lust visible on his face, Naruto simply smiled and approached her, standing well within arm's reach. "Speaking of which, I believe your father said something earlier about leaving for a few days," he began. Too distracted by his eyes to notice, Talia felt his arms encircle her before a hand squeezed her right butt cheek. Raz al Ghul's lone attacker moved silently throughout the Gotham Museum, waiting for nightfall, scaling the wall to the roof, slicing through the skylight's glass, and rappelling down after locating his target, who was trapped behind a glass case. He used his gloved fist to smash it and carefully rolled up the old parchment before making his way to the exit. The lights that were always on illuminated the doorway, but as he got closer, a figure emerged. It was Batman. He threw a big knife and waited long enough for Batman to deflect it with a batarang before fleeing in the opposite direction. However, by chance, Batman had already thrown another batarang with a rope attached, which caused it to repeatedly wrap around his waist before he grabbed the man by the feet. The big attacker grunted and struggled against the sturdy rope, but Batman was able to stop him. The crime fighter said, "Now, let's take a look at you." Batman grabbed the black hood, mask, removed it, and exclaimed, "Yubu," as he recognized the bald man. He recognized the voice as that of Raz al Ghul. "You could have been my successor, detective," stated the voice. "Now you will suffer the fate of all mortal flesh." Batman turned to see the man standing in the doorway. He had just passed. Something was thrown at him abruptly and unexpectedly by Raz al Ghul. He thought it was a weapon and grabbed it out of the air without looking, only to yell when 2 fangs dug into his arm, indicating that he had caught a snake. an Egyptian king cobra, no less. Batman became drowsy shortly after the bite and collapsed as Ra's al Ghul and Yubu fled. He was only awake long enough to retrieve an anti-venom vial and consume it before fainting. "Daughter, is something the matter? You look unwell," Ra's al Ghul asked, finding Talia and Naruto waiting for him when he returned to their base. "I've been training, father," the woman said without missing a beat, her hair disheveled and her lipstick smeared. "Good, it's important to stay in good physical condition." As a servant handed Naruto the rolls of parchment, Talia and the blonde man exchanged glances. When Al Ghul saw Naruto reading the finished scroll, he asked, "How long until the ritual is ready?" But he scowled when the blonde sneered, "What's the problem?" Before turning and leaving without even looking up from the paper, Naruto told him, "It is evident that I didn't pay attention to what she did. This woman was not as gifted as I believed. So much wasted power in such a simple thing. But as for your question, have your men take the supplies to the pit. I will be ready within the next few hours." For Ra, the wait seemed to go on forever, and after all this time, he really didn't have much patience for this when another of his soldiers attempted to correct him for giving him, Ra's al Ghul, the respect he deserved. He finally saw another display of the blonde's power, but he wasn't brave enough to complain to the powerful being. He would have thought it was impossible for a man to fly 30 feet into the air after receiving an uppercut to the jaw if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes. The blonde eventually informed him that the time had come, and before long, he, Talia, Naruto, and a few of his closest friends were in the Lazarus pit, where they discovered a big iron pot that was boiling. Naruto stated, "Everything has been pre-prepared and all I must do is add my own power to this mixture." Just before they started to feel as though they were wearing a winter coat while walking in the midday sun, the mixture inside boiled violently as the fire that had been built beneath the pot flickered and grew into a raging inferno of black and blue fire. With a ceremonial knife he had them bring, Naruto went to the fire and started cutting his palm. He informed them that, "With my blood, this potion will be complete." However, a metal object struck his hand, sending the blade flying over the edge and disappearing into the blue-green liquid of the pit. "Who dares?" hissed Naruto, spinning around with his demon face on, eyes narrowed and red, but not furious enough to change his tone of voice. Another object flew from the cave's mouth, but the blonde caught it. Naruto examined it. It was a thin metal that was surprisingly heavy for its size. "Bat?" he asked. "A bat?" Before the center of it began to beep and flash red. "Throw it away. It's a," Talia said, reaching out as though to try to grab him despite being more than 50 feet away. However, it exploded in a bright flash before she could finish, sending him staggering as the metal surrounding it mangled his hand and the full force of the stun grenade hit his sensitive eyes and ears. Batman swooped in and easily defeated 2 guards, then swiftly eliminated the remaining ones while making it appear simple. Batman, who was still going to be blind and deaf for a while, turned to face the man and his daughter and yelled, "Your plans are over, Ra's." He paid no attention to the blonde. "On the contrary, detective," he said, looking behind the man without showing any concern, "you just slowed them down." Batman swiftly turned and saw that the blonde he had with the Batarang flashbang was holding his good hand over his eyes and letting his blood drip in over the pot. Before kicking the pot into the Lazarus pit, Naruto completed his task by using his sense of smell and suppressing the ringing in his ears and the pain in his eyes. When the heavy pot fell in, the thick chemicals of the pit splashed and ceased boiling as the 2 substances mixed. Despite all of his abilities, Naruto had other issues. The flashbang only made him blind and deaf. His powers could heal any wound or injury, but only if something broke or bled. So he did what he knew would be effective. The eyes of Talia and Ra's al Ghul grew wide. Batman shouted, "No," and attempted to stop him without hesitation. Naruto jumped into the pit. According to their knowledge of the pit, it could kill those who bathed in it and completely cure a dying man. But such power came at a cost if the blonde survived. Those who returned experienced a brief but terrible insanity. They were afraid of what lay ahead. Naruto didn't intend to dip himself when his eyes opened up beneath the viscous soupy liquid of the Lazarus pit, but he didn't have time to wait for his eye cells to adjust and heal. Given that he took the flashpoint blank, he would be fighting blind for a while, and the process could take some time, depending on how severe the damage was. His eyes were fixed, his body was being healed by the pit's powers, and he felt as though he had just woken up from the most restful sleep of his life. The water surrounding him started to bubble, turning from the distinctive blue-green hue that characterizes all the pits to a glistening pool that resembled the purest water on the planet. Batman was ambushed by a group of guards who had rescued their boss Ra's al Ghul more than 30 feet above him. They each carried assault rifles and a razor-edged curved saber, but since their target was now between them and their leader, they all grabbed their swords and launched an attack. Batman made it seem like child's play by dodging, ducking, and weaving between swings as he defeated each one individually. What's more amazing is that he did it without killing them or causing permanent damage. The caped crusader snarled, "Just give it up," as he stood in the center of the now conscious bodyguards, their weapons strewn on the ground close by. "You're finished, Ra's." Ra's al Ghul said, "Well done, detective," as he glanced at the man and briefly glanced over to the edge of the pit. "It's good to know that I had made the right choice in successors. Too bad that you allow your morals to get in the way." Just before they heard the sound of boiling water, the pit's usual sickly green glow abruptly disappeared and was replaced by a gentle white glow. Batman turned to demand an explanation, thinking Ra's had orchestrated this, but Talia and Ra's al Ghul appeared equally confused. Unnaturally, the pit's water exploded upward, creating a massive pillar of water that flung something out onto the overhanging rock close to the pit's center. It was Naruto, looking as healthy as ever despite being completely soaked, with tiny steam bubbles rising from his body. With a wry smile, Ra's al Ghul turned back to face Batman and said, "But it would seem that you failed in your endeavor. You were too late to stop this." In an attempt to learn more, Batman probed, "And what was that?" "Nice try, detective, but I am not falling for such trickery. I would offer you a chance to escape, but I doubt our friend there will allow it, seeing as you attacked him not minutes ago." Ra's al Ghul was the only one who saw his ruse. The man looked pointedly behind the bat. Batman's eyes widened as he turned quickly and saw the blonde from earlier looking directly into his eyes a foot away from them. Batman jumped back, watching the stone crack beneath the force of the blonde's foot as he lifted it and slammed it down with a heel drop. Fortunately, he had some experience with these types of fights. After all, he had fought Bane more than once, so he knew that if the blonde hit him directly, it was game over for him. The man stopped and felt a sense of dread rise as Naruto abruptly disappeared. Could he manage a person like Bane who possessed both superhuman speed and strength? He disappeared once more, and Batman felt his back scream in agony before he found himself sailing through the air. "Your skills are commendable," the blonde said, reappearing a few feet away with his arms crossed. "Few have what one needs to avoid such attacks." He landed, skidded across the floor, and came to rest at Ra's and Talia's feet. He paused long enough to glance up and see their raised eyebrows at him, since Talia had been in love with him for some time and would always refer to him as "my beloved" whenever she saw or talked about him. It was a little upsetting to see that she seemed unconcerned before he knew it. However, the blonde had grabbed him by the ankle and slung him across the room once more, knocking him unconscious when he struck the wall. As Alfred put away his painkillers, Bruce moaned as he lay in bed. "Oh, my head hurts," he complained. "Alfred, how long will it take for these to work?" "It doesn't say, sir, but in my opinion you were lucky that they left you alive and in one piece," said Alfred, his devoted butler and friend, as he examined the bottle. Bruce must admit that he was dropped off in his hotel room. He woke up and was able to send a distress signal back to the United States, where he was picked up and returned by Alfred and Barbara, who had now recovered. Since he was supposed to have spent the entire week in Gotham, it was evident that he was unable to go to the hospital with these unexplained injuries. He was fortunate to have a private physician who treated him and put him on painkillers to lessen his discomfort while he recovered. Barbara, on the other hand, was in excellent health now, but she was also a little annoyed that she had to work alone. She had previously been confined to her house or the Batcave, behind the computer, and now she had to fight crime by herself, unless Alfred wasn't too busy to assist with the technical support, as he occasionally did. However, his thoughts turned to what had transpired in the desert as Alfred left him to try to sleep. He had to find a new player in this somehow, because that blonde wasn't one of Ra's al Ghul's men as he had previously thought. But as his medication started to take effect, those ideas began to fade and he found himself in a dreamlike state. Talia al Ghul exclaimed, "Amazing," as she saw her father emerge from the water of what had once been a Lazarus pit. Ra's aging symptoms had all disappeared, and he no longer appeared to be a frail elderly man but rather a healthy middle-aged man. They discovered that they had to actually walk into the waters due to the changes made to the area that used to be the pit. This meant that they had to walk around the pool's outer rim to the edge where one could walk in and eventually reach the deep end. It turned out that Naruto had used his powers to make it throw him back up to them, something the Lazarus pits had always done for them. Touching the sides of his head, the man mumbled in shock, "My mind, it's clear. I'm thinking as clearly as ever." The arcane chemicals within were raw and unrefined. They were unfinished products to creating what is known as the mythical fountain of youth, Naruto clarified. Ra's al Ghul clenched his fist and grinned, "The fountain of youth, never-ending life, all mine. The chains of time may no longer bind you, but you are far from undying," Naruto abruptly stated. "There is a price to be paid for this." "And what is that?" "The fountain does not grant immortality, You can be killed and you can still grow old. This merely resets the clock and reverts you to your prime, but like with anything, it is not unlimited. The more the fountain is used, the less water is left. This fountain holds enough to keep a single man ageless for 1,000 lifetimes, but the more who use it, the less there is. After a brief period of silence, Ra's al Ghul nodded and said, "It is more than enough time to realize my dreams, or at least find a successor to do so in my stead." Naruto murmured, "Yes, well, we have both upheld our agreement. You have the Fountain of Youth. And you shall have my support," concluded Ra's al Ghul. "I shall have a plane ready to return you to Gotham, if that is your wish." Naruto nodded, eager to see that crusader in a cap. Was it Batman? Perhaps he would even check out some of the villains in Gotham, as he seemed like something that could keep people entertained for a while. Ra's had a lot of files on the city's criminals, including a psychotic clown named Joker, the clown's ex-partner Harley, a bioterrorist named Poison Ivy, and a man who was obsessed with Riddle and called himself the Riddler. The list continued. "Must you go?" As they surfaced and got a helicopter ready for him to depart and head back to the airport, Talia's voice snapped him out of his reverie. He turned to face her and noticed a slight frown of disappointment on her face at the idea of his leaving. He reflected, looking into her blue-green eyes, "But I must admit there is one thing I shall miss. I have never been one for desert. The sand has always been the domain of my lower-ranked sibling, and I'm all for keeping it that way." A few of Ra's al Ghul's people who had been standing too close were blinded when the chopper began to blow sand around with the downdraft. The blonde was called by one of the servants, "Sir, time to leave." Naruto nodded and said goodbye to the woman before making his way to the helicopter and boarding it just before it took off for the airport, where the jet would be waiting. "Goodbye, my beloved," Talia said with a sigh as she watched the helicopter take off into the distance. "Are you sure you should be out on patrol?" Batman glanced at his partner and gave her a slight glare before returning his attention to the area in search of trouble. Batgirl took a step back. Fine, gee, you're worse than my dad sometimes, but you have to admit it's not smart being out after what happened 3 weeks ago." The man remained silent for a short while, unable to respond or retort, particularly when she was correct. After all, that blonde back in Egypt had caused him to sustain several sprains and bruised ribs, in addition to a concussion. "I'll be fine," he said quietly. They could have mistaken him for one of them if they hadn't been standing next to each other at the time. "Yahoo!" a man shouted as he swung past them on a rope, swinging languidly down the street like they could. Batgirl wondered, what's his story? She wasn't shocked because she had witnessed some odd things in her brief life. Batman took aim and pulled out his grappling hook gun. "Let's ask," he said, and the girl followed suit. The swinging man broke the moving arm that held a large ice cream cone in a shower of sparks as he slammed into a large moving neon sign of an ice cream company. Both followed him around the corner. To their surprise, however, the man did not scream as he fell. Instead, he laughed and managed to grab a building ledge as the big arm landed on a set of power lines that were suspended high above the streets. Breaking 2 of the 4 lines, they almost killed a few, but they were able to jump away in time to escape with their lives and limps after the 2 ends of each broken line shot sparks as they fell into the street below. The 2 heroes swooped down and separated, Batgirl landing on a fire escape and Batman swinging onto the building to the left, where a billboard was located. They both aimed their grappling hooks at a line beneath the arm, securing it before the lines supporting it snapped. Batman's hook had encircled the bars on the lower levels of the fire escape, and they were beginning to bend. Both grunted and moaned as their lines started to slip through their hands with the additional weight. Batgirl was straining against the stone after puncturing Batman's building's wall. The people below were too stunned to move and mostly just ducked as the arm appeared to be about to crush them. As the sign continued to fall, however, the lines taunted and held, keeping the arm a few feet above them, where it swung slightly. The 2 exhaled in relief before turning to face the man in charge, who was giggling foolishly while handing on the ledge. The fact that this was an overweight, elderly man with thick round glasses and balding blonde hair rather than some young thrill-seeker was what shocked them the most. Batman asked, "Hey, are you okay?" to make sure the man wasn't hurt before lowering himself and helping him up. The man said to him, "Never better, great, good," Batman replied. "Now, there's a window a few feet over here. If you'll follow me, we'll get you in." The man threw his hands in the air and sneered. "Window? I ain't going in," he said. "This is going to be the best night of my life." "It could also be your last," Batman said, leaning forward. Before turning around and skipping down the ledge for a few feet, the man told him, "Oh, come on, there's nothing to fear. Fear's a prison, you see, and I've busted out." Then, shouting, "Tag!" as they both fell over the edge and started to fall again, he turned and tackled Batman. As Batman continued to fall, the man collided with a wooden flagpole that was suspended from the building's side, Shattering it and somewhat slowing his descent, he aimed his grappling hook at one of the gargoyles that encircled the building, narrowly missing it but sending the line circling the stone. Batman had just a few seconds to spare before he had to grab the man by the wrist, saving his life to the astonishment of the onlookers below, as the line came to a halt. Someone had called the police, and several squad cars had arrived during the entire ordeal. Batman handed the man over, where he was arrested and taken to the police station due to his recklessness and the possibility that he could have killed all those people. Batman and Batgirl had no idea that more than just innocent bystanders had been watching the entire event. Two men in black suits stood beside a frowning man in a white business suit who was leaning against one of the buildings. He muttered, "Shit, fucking Batman, the boss is going to be pissed. Come on, let's get out of here," he said, turning to the two men on either side of him and gesturing for them to follow. After passing a few people, he ran into a blonde man with a leather jacket and jeans. "Watch it," he growled, glaring at the man. Both the men in suits and the crime fighters were unaware that they were being watched, and by someone much closer than they might have thought. Even in Gotham City, elderly and overweight people like that didn't just decide to risk their lives by swinging around on a rope several hundred feet above the ground. Naruto watched what happened with interest. Then he overheard someone discussing their boss's desire to test a novel substance they dubbed a anti-fear toxin. According to his observations, the Tarzan reject up there had been exposed to the toxin, and it seemed that the man had a severe fear of heights, or he used to have one, anyway. When things got bad, Batman and his sidekick came to the rescue. Since he was certain that Batman would be looking into this, he thought it might be worthwhile to track down this boss and learn more about what was happening. He might even get involved and mess with Batman. The blonde gave him a menacing glare when the man knocked shoulders with him and pretended that he, Naruto, was at fault. Yes, if only to torture that jerk right now, he would undoubtedly track down his boss. After tracking the men down and sneaking into the building through a skylight, Naruto heard the man in white say, "And after that, Batman handed him over to the cops. There wasn't anything that we could do," as he knelt upside down on the ceiling. If the large oval table was any indication, the room was actually used for conferences. It was nearly 15 feet long and 4 feet wide, with 3 chairs on each side and one at each end. The man in white was sitting tensely, and his 2 companions, who appeared to be bodyguards, were standing behind him on either side, their arms behind their backs as he explained what had happened to the other man. The man in white appeared a little uneasy. The 3 flinched as the other man lifted a pale hand and struck the end of his wooden cane against the table. "What's the use in providing me with test patients if you're going to lose them? You should have monitored him more carefully." The man was dressed in jet black pants, a pair of sharp-toed boots that matched his wide-brimmed bat, and a ripped and battered dark gray duster over a faded dark brown shirt. Strangely enough, though, a noose that was partially hidden by his long, disheveled black hair hung around his neck, adding to the impression that he was a rotten corpse Euro, especially when combined with the mask that resembled a brown skull. We tried, but we had no idea your treatment would be that effective. All the more reason to keep the subject under close scrutiny. We don't want to give ourselves away just yet, do we?" The white-clad man straightened up and faked a smile while wildly shaking his head. "Don't worry, Mr. Scarecrow, we've taken care of it. No one knows a thing about this." The man in white yelled and flipped out of his chair when Naruto asked, "Is that so?" He then fell and crouching on the table, knocking down his 2 guards in the process. "Because I've listened in and heard quite a bit," he said. "Who are you?" "Another would-be hero?" asked Scarecrow as he rose from his seat and held a pistol at his side. "Hardly so, I find heroism to be rather bland and thankless," Naruto said as he leapt off the table. Before firing, the man hissed, "Be that as it may, I won't have someone like you knowing about this," and pointed his gun at the blonde. The weapon made a pop and hissing sound, indicating that it was an air gun of some kind. Something struck Naruto in the chest, but he didn't care at the moment. Glancing down, he discovered a tiny dart lodged in his chest and extracted it. "Now that you've been injected with my fear toxin, your torment will begin as every fear you have comes to life," Scarecrow thought as he lowered the weapon. A second went by. The other 3 men stood up and observed. A minute went by. 1 more minute. Naruto looked up. "Is that all? Am I not supposed to be seeing monsters and all manner of terrors?" As though struck, Scarecrow staggered back and said, "Impossible, no man is fearless." "Maybe so, but you're not dealing with a man." The blonde smirked and said to them, before his eyes reddened. "I'm much worse," he said. The following day, Barbara was at Gotham State University having a good time during her break from school, savoring the little time she had left to fight crime. While wearing a mask at night, the redhead made herself a late breakfast and then, wearing only her short robe and underwear, sat in front of the TV after sleeping in an extra hour and waking up from what felt like the best sleep she had ever had. Bruce had set up a scholarship to help her pay her bills in exchange for her giving up her nightlife to fight crime with him, so she didn't have to worry about her dad showing up or anything. She had also moved into a nice apartment across town to be closer to the school, so she didn't have a roommate to deal with. When her phone rang and she heard Bruce talking about the bat, it was Bruce. The caller ID told her that the man was at Wayne Enterprises. "Barbara, I called to update you on last night," he said to her over the phone. Barbara began to say, "Wait, why are you calling me personally? Don't Alfred usually do that?" But paused for a moment when she remembered that the Tarzan impersonator had passed out just hours after being arrested. "Dodging stockbrokers?" she asked. Bruce gasped, "You have no idea. I finally escaped and they think I'm on a business call." "How sneaky, no, how underhanded of you. You're one to talk. I've heard about how you used Alfred as a cover to dodge some of those boys at school," Bruce replied. She hadn't really meant to do that, Barbara said, blushing when she reprimanded a boy who had been pursuing her for a date. He refused to believe her, so one day she took out her phone when she noticed him coming from a distance. Flashback on campus at the university. Barbara took out her phone, pretended to get a call, and pressed the call button before speaking. "Hi baby. We still on for tonight? Oh, I can't wait. I love the way you make me feel when we're together. No one can compare when it comes to you." She caught a glimpse of the boy's crushed expression and let out a sigh of relief as he left. She yelled in surprise when Alfred's voice said, "Ms. Barbara, I had no idea you felt that way." Over the other end of the line, she then checked the screen to discover that she had hit the redial button and called Wayne Manor. The girl's cheeks were flushed with shame as she asked, How long have you been listening?" "Oh, from when you said that you loved the way I made you feel." End of flashback. Bruce interrupted her thoughts and began, "Anyway, he's still unconscious, but the police discovered something about him. He has an extreme case of acrophobia." Barbara exclaimed, "He was afraid of heights. So why was he swinging?" "You're not putting me off any longer, Wayne," a man shouted in the distance as he drew closer and closer, interrupting her question with the sound of doors slamming over the phone. "I got ideas. Ideas that are going to revolutionize cost accounting," he said. "I'll call you back," Bruce said into the phone after glancing at the man who had stormed into his office. The wealthy businessman and masked hero, dressed in a nice black suit with a red tie, turned to examine the other man more closely. He appeared to be just another paper pusher who worked for him, complete with a collared shirt, tie, belt, loafers, and pleated pants. The man was a foot shorter than his boss and much less muscular, but he put on a brave front. Bruce said, "You must be Mr. Gray," since his secretary had informed him that the man had approached him while he was out and insisted on seeing him. The man yelled, "That's right, Mousy some more Gray. Been sitting at the same desk for 18 years, afraid to say anything for losing my job," just before Bruce's secretary rushed in and cut them off. The woman tried to push the man back, but he resisted. "Mr. Wayne, I'm so sorry," she said. "I've called security," she said. He looked at the other man and said, "Mr. Gray, now isn't really the time," but first he reassured the woman, "It's all right, Sarah," letting her know he wasn't angry with her. "Oh, gonna try and intimidate me, huh? Well, if you think that I'm just going to crawl back to my desk, you're wrong, because I quit," Samore said, glaring past the woman and pushing her away before stomping forward. Bruce raised an eyebrow as he saw the man stomp off, only to halt a few feet from the door, after tossing the papers he was carrying to the ground. The man said, "Oh, and one more thing," before turning around and approaching Sarah before two security guards hurried in to eject him. The woman slapped him off his feet as he attempted to give her a French kiss after grabbing her by the shoulders. Bruce noticed that the man had dropped his wallet after the guards had ejected him. When he bent down to retrieve it, he noticed a card protruding and searched for the man's ID to determine where to send it. As he took out the card, he had the odd impression that what he had witnessed had something to do with Tarzan from Gotham the previous evening. Never be afraid. Give 555-0100 a call. He needed to investigate the new piece of the puzzle that had appeared. Sitting on a chair in the tiny lab, Scarecrow had managed to assemble to conduct his research and create his toxins. Naruto held the gun that Scarecrow used to fire his darts full of fear toxin and spun it around on his finger. "So you're working towards creating a toxin that eliminates fear," Naruto thought as the man worked. For one whom wishes to utilize the fears of mankind, it seems to be an asinine thing to do unless. Scarecrow turned and revealed his real self. His hair was the color of a mature carrot, and his face was pale with freckles. However, that pale face was now covered in scrapes and bruises. One side of his face was also swollen, the cheek puffed out slightly, and a deep bruise had developed. Both of his eyes were black, but only one was so swollen that it had to be forced shut. He winced in agony if he prodded his bottom lip, which was swollen and busted on one side. Before swinging his cane, Scarecrow repeatedly shot Naruto because he didn't think he was genuinely inhuman and unaffected by the fear toxin. In response, Naruto grabbed the gun and the cane, beat the man viciously, and declared that he now owned his ass naturally. Naruto had not inquired about the project up until this point, but he appeared to put some pieces together after giving it some thought. Naruto smirked and sat up, saying, "Someone is paying for you to research such a thing? Care to tell me who it may be, or do you need some motivation?" Naruto asked. With all the big machinery and bulky shipping containers being unloaded, the Gotham City dockyard was a very dangerous place both during the day and at night unless it was for government business or work. The docks were closed at night due to numerous safety concerns. The city council had hoped that it would help prevent fatalities and injuries on the property, but they had not anticipated that it would turn into a nighttime criminal hangout. During the day, you would see employees going about their daily lives, but if you went inside at night, you would find drug dealers, smugglers, and even a few gangs acting as though they owned the place. The docks also served as a place for criminals to conduct business with one another. Now wearing his mask, Scarecrow watched as his thugs parked the big delivery truck beside a shipping container and then used barely concealed handguns to guard it. His heart began to race as he noticed a small cluster of SUVs approaching them slowly. He knew that his buyer was getting closer. Unable to see the blonde who had been tormenting him for the past few days, he looked around anxiously, feeling as though his eyes were watching him and observing every move he made like a predator. 10 suited bodyguards with submachine guns were released from each of the 3 SUVs that pulled up and stopped before each door opened. A man and a woman emerged from the rear seat of the middle truck. In addition to wearing a fedora hat on top of his dark blue designer pinstripe suit, the man's entire head was covered in a black wooden mask that was designed to resemble a skull. A pair of oval-shaped glasses concealed the woman's sharp, no-nonsense eyes, and her raven-colored hair was pulled back into a professional ponytail. The woman was of Asian descent. She carried a clipboard to her chest as if it were her life, and she wore a gray business suit with a skirt. "We have arrived, sir," the woman said in a lifeless, emotionless voice to the man wearing the mask. After giving her an irritated look, the man in the mask said, "I can see that, Ms. Lee," and then he approached Scarecrow, his bodyguards trailing a short distance behind. "So Scarecrow, you called and said that you finished what I asked," he said. Scarecrow nodded and replied, "Black Mask, the anti-fear toxin has been finished." After Black Mask gave him a nod, one of his goons turned, took 2 suitcases out of the middle SUV, and approached. He gave a fellow henchman one of the cases, and when they opened it, they discovered a sizable sum of cash stacked on one side. Black Mask said, "Here's your money," just before Ms. Lee, his assistant, interrupted. The woman, who had interrupted her boss, said indifferently, 150,000 each in small, used bills. The individual sighed. "Yeah, that's 300,000, this stuff better work or else." The Scarecrow sang, "Well, you won't have to worry about that," he murmured, 300 isn't enough anymore. The price has gone up. If you want it, it'll cost you twice as much." "What?" the man yelled. "We had a deal. What makes you think that you can raise the price?" "Me?" snipped Scarecrow. "It wasn't me, it was my new boss." The words were stifled. A mixture of anxiety and fear. The reason he was afraid was not because Black Mask had them outnumbered, but also because they were outgunned. His new boss frightened him. Black Mask looked at the man and blinked before mockingly laughing and saying, "Oh, this is great. The so-called Master of Fear is now taking orders. How pathetic." Now, every member of Black Mask's crew except Ms. Lee was giggling at the villain. Scarecrow appeared completely unconcerned, but his own thugs were looking at one another with concern. The people who saw their boss's boss made him seem like a demon, even though they hadn't dealt with him directly, the white man with his 2 guards. "To the contrary," said a fresh voice, "I find that when faced with a something of greater force such as it is much healthier to join rather than fight." Black Mask scanned the area frantically, and his goons prepared their automatics in the same manner. "Who's there? Stop hiding and show yourself," the man demanded. "Hiding?" replied the voice. "I find it quite insulting that you would even say such a thing. Honestly, I've been up here the whole time. Maybe one should consider getting a mask that doesn't hinder one's vision over trying to seem cool." They all turned to see a figure sitting atop a pile of shipping containers, his body partially obscured by the shadow of another container that was stacked beside it. Black Mask snarled, "Why don't you come down here and say it to my face?" To their surprise, the man cocked his head to the side and disappeared, only to reappear a foot from Black Mask's face. "Your attempts at intimidation are pathetic." Black Mask jumped back and gasped at the unexpected appearance as his men pointed their weapons at the newcomer. Wearing blue jeans, a black t-shirt, and a leather jacket, Naruto grinned at them and flashed his slightly sharpened teeth. Naruto said, "Now, I've gone over the terms of the agreement that you made with my new worker maid, substituting the word worker for the more obvious term bitch, and in turn, have found the terms to be lacking. Naruto did not go into specifics, but the main idea is that you will pay $600,000 while grinning under that mask. As everyone watched, Black Mask narrowed his eyes at the blonde and drew a pistol, pressing the barrel into Naruto's whiskered cheek. You think you can threaten me? He growled. I run this fucking city. Me? I run this. You think you can come into MY City and threaten ME? Just who the fuck do you think you are? He said. Who am I? No, a better question would be, what am I? I am the one who sits atop a throne of skulls. I am the one who holds unimaginable power. I am the one who holds your very life within my grasp. I am Naruto. I am the ninth, Naruto said, bending forward to the point where the man's arm was slightly pushed back. What the hell, another fucking lunatic from Arkham? I'll be nice and put you out of your misery, Black Mask said, having to retreat a few steps by this time. The bullet fired when he squeezed the trigger, releasing the hammer that struck the firing pin. The head of Naruto jerked back. I'm about fucking tired of Arkham. Can't keep fools like this under control, Black Mask muttered loudly as he turned his back. The blonde said, you are the only idiot here. Black Mask turned back to the blonde, who had not yet fallen, and watched as the blonde slowly moved his head and gave him a death stare with red eyes that glowed. As he displayed the still warm lead that had been thrown at him, Naruto opened his mouth and unrolled his tongue, revealing that it was a little longer than usual a euro, though nobody really noticed. I was going to let you go free with paying the 600, but as of now, he said, letting it fall to the ground and scowling at the group. Before anyone realized what was happening, the blonde disappeared, and all 10 of Black Mask's goons were disemboweled. Some had their throats torn out, others had them torn off, and one was even torn in half at the waist. No one moved during the carnage, and when the blonde returned to his place, everyone was truly terrified. Continue with my previous plan, your part is over here, Naruto grinned as he turned back to face Scarecrow. Fearful of becoming like the others, Scarecrow nodded as soon as possible. He and the thugs climbed into their truck and left. Now, as I was saying, you can continue to do whatever it is that you do here, just as I have with Scarecrow, but from this moment on, the blonde said, turning to Black Mask, and his helper Naruto began, pausing to grab Black Mask by the neck and lift him a few inches off the ground. I own you when I have use for you. I shall call and you will do you are told when you are told to jump. You better jump and make sure you jumped high enough. When Black Mask failed to respond, Naruto used his free hand to seize the man's wrist and crush it, causing the crime boss to scream in agony. Refrain from making me repeat myself, or the next thing is coming off instead of being broken. Black Mask grimaced and said, fuck, okay, fuck, just let me go. The man fell and cradled his wrist after Naruto let him go and dropped him. He looked at the man's assistant and said, good, now that we have reached an agreement, I suggest that you find better bodyguards. This lot died far too quickly. As for her, well, at least we know you're not gay, he added. Maybe I'll even find a use for you as well, he said, grinning as he approached the woman. She gave a noticeable shudder. Well, I shall be on my way, we'll be in touch, Naruto said, laughing and turning to the side. And I will be taking this. Think of it as your first kick up, I believe that's the correct way you crime boss types say it, he said, before reaching down and grabbing one of the suitcases containing cash. The blonde then leapt and landed on the nearby warehouse's roof, disappearing in a matter of seconds. As he departed, the two surviving creatures that were still present observed Black Mask and his assistant hurried away, stopping just long enough to pick up the other money case and climb into the SUV, leaving the other two cars, and the bodies behind Black Mask was already hurt and sufficiently frightened by this new person. Commissioner James Gordon never had any trouble getting up early. Eventually, getting ready for work just seems to come naturally to him on a few occasions. He had even shown up for work on his day off. In all his years of service, however, he never seemed to get used to going to a crime scene first thing in the morning. Since they were currently understaffed, he accepted a call asking if he could assist with a case since her partner, Harvey Bullock, had already left before she arrived. He was picked up by Detective Renee Montoya, a pretty Latina. They exited the vehicle as they arrived at the crime scene and went toward the spot where they first encountered Bullock. A big CSI truck had been parked in the way, so they were still unable to see the entire crime scene. Now that he was in charge, Gordon asked, "What do we get?" Bullock, a big man who seemed incapable of handling an undercover beat and would fail at regular police work well, unless he took out his notes and performed as Santa during the holidays. "It was a massacre up there," Bullock said with a pale face. 10 victims, all armed with illegal weapons, and most were suspected criminals. There were 2 SUVs parked close by and tire marks were found nearby, so we believe that there was another car. So there might be survivors, Gordon said. We'll get up with the hospitals and see if anyone showed up with gunshot wounds. I'll get on that right now, Montoya said with a nod. I don't think it'll do any good for that those unlucky bastards up there didn't die from bullet wounds. Bullock shook his head to get their attention, looked a little sicker than usual, and said, damn you, you just have to see it for yourself. Bullock trailed behind and leaned against the truck as Gordon and Montoya exchanged glances and went to view the bodies. Both came back a few seconds later. Gordon, looking pale but not as bad, shook his head as Montoya threw up off to the side. The older man turned to the woman and sighed, only in Gotham, saying, get it together, Montoya, we need to process the crime scene. It paralyzes you, the white man said. It keeps you from getting what you want, keeps us from experiencing life to the fullest. Now, how many of you want to banish it from your lives? The audience in front of the stage he was standing on started to cheer, whistle, and clap. Some even gave a little jump. Naruto sat at a long table with one leg crossed over his knee, watching from behind a one-way mirror behind the stage, and above it. If anything, Scarecrow was correct when he said that fear was a powerful weapon that could be used to save lives and act as a deterrent. Naruto closed his eyes and crossed his arms as he began to reflect on his knowledge of fear. He had been living in fear for years. His life had been a living hell because he had been the nine-tailed fox's container. Everyone looked to the fox for revenge after losing a loved one to his attack in times of grief or rage. People didn't care if the victim was a helpless, innocent child. All they wanted was to believe and feel that the person they were hurting was also in pain. Fear, if nothing else, it could be considered his constant companion. Thinking that today might be the last day, he went to bed wondering if they would firebomb his apartment, woke up fearing an attack, and just went about his daily life. When he joined the academy, things finally improved a little, but the fear persisted. But he didn't realize the full impact of fear until he was in his late teens. The masters of it taught him this lesson in earnest. Initially, it was Pain, the enigmatic leader of the Akatsuki and the self-declared God, who had the authority to support such a claim. Pain had spearheaded the attack on Konoha with the intention of luring him out, using his paths to attack and murder numerous ninja because of the fear he incited. The leaders were thinking about handing him over, but he had already struck before they could do so. A real clash of titans, the battle was epic in scope for years to come. The few who were able to see it told stories about their strength. However, only he had survived in the end, but at a high price. The fox took advantage of the fact that Pain almost killed him to try to use him as his second coming and attempt to take over his body. The fourth, however, had sealed a part of himself to prevent this, which the fox had not considered. However, since Naruto had already broken the seal, the fox was unable to control or flee him, but he absorbed the Kyuubi much more quickly than before. Instead of discovering a god in waiting, he discovered a weak, sickly little man on life support after he used a chakra rod to tack Pain down. The god's only defense is a gorgeously gorgeous woman with blue hair who has the ability to manipulate paper. With his veins pulsing with the fox's power, which only fueled his rage, Conan swiftly disabled the girl before silently killing Pain. He crushed that weak fuck's skull in a single act of violence, releasing anger that had been building up over the years. 2 violent acts. That is, nobody knew that he had raped Conan in front of Pain's corpse after she woke up, then burned her body like a balled up piece of paper. Pain was the only one about whom everyone knew anything. Actually, it fits. After they thought about giving him up, he vanished from the world for a while and refused to go back to what was once Konoha. Lastly, there was Madara Uchiha and his scheme to use the Ten Tails container to obstruct the moon in order to rule the world and impose his will on the populace. Another conflict between the gods, but just like Pain, he was cursed with every last breath as he passed away at the blonde's hand. Naruto was ageless at that point because he had already absorbed the fox. Naruto, who was immortal, strong, and filled with adolescent rage at the world, set out to cause mayhem. However, he saw fit. He lived for several lifetimes and slept for years at a time before being sealed away. Ah, boss. Naruto opened his eyes and gazed anxiously at the suited henchman. He asked slowly, elaborating on the word, yes. After witnessing the blonde's actions the day before, the man began tremblingly, I don't really understand the plan. You were paid to do, not to question. Those who need to understand have already been informed. It wouldn't do should Batman learn of this prematurely. Now leave and do as you have been told. Already terrified of the blonde, the henchman nodded so as not to agitate the man seated in front of them. In order to avoid being discovered, Bruce Wayne moved stealthily through the building's hallways, heading upstairs and toward a room where he had heard some goons mention that it was kept. He had no idea what it was, but he had a strong suspicion that it couldn't be anything positive. particularly while he was at this Never Fear meeting, which he later found out the Tarzan of Gotham and his former employee Mr. Gray had attended. His fake mustache and black business suit were a minor change, but for the time being they worked perfectly as a disguise unless they looked closely at him. Anyone who happened to glance at him wouldn't recognize him. He was about to open the door when he noticed the handle turning and stopped when a man walked out huffing and muttering something about scary things. He returned to the door and peered in after the man had left. Bruce entered and took another look around, but found nothing. He noticed a large conference table with all but one chair in place. Next to a one-way mirror that looked out over the stage, the other chair was positioned in front of the window so that someone could observe from a distance. He knew something had to be there, so he nodded to himself when he noticed a metal cabinet against the far wall. He approached, knelt, and turned the handles, only to discover that they were locked. He mumbled, "Damn," forgetting his lock picks. This was the same thing he had done every time he had reprimanded Robin and Batgirl for not being on patrol. Fortunately, he discovered a paperclip on the table and used it to open the door, revealing a large number of silver canisters with valves on top. He didn't see Naruto smirk as he fell silently from the ceiling. The canister rolled away as Bruce let go, and the last thing he felt was a sharp pain in the back of his head before he fell to the ground. Bruce held his aching head and crawled to his knees, moaning. He muttered, "What the?" as he looked out and saw that he was outside the Gotham Zoo's crocodile habitat. He noticed movement behind the fence and saw Scarecrow emerge from behind it, standing atop a sizable stone platform close to the opposite end of the enclosure. However, the villain drew his gun and fired an object that burst into a yellow gas mist before he could say anything. Smirking, Scarecrow watched as the man inhaled the gas and coughed several times before getting to his feet, and scowling he said, "That's right, come and get me," as the man who had been snooping approached the fence. Before being pulled under, Bruce clambered over and dove into the water. Scarecrow hummed as blood began to fill the water, turning it red, and then turned to go. The croc floated belly up behind Bruce, who surfaced moments later unscathed. Naruto smirked while he watched the show in the distance. Unbeknownst to him, Scarecrow had just given his worst adversary the upper hand. The idea was funny. A hero without fear, Batman without fear. "The next time I see Ra's al Ghul, I'll have to thank him," the blonde thought to herself. In addition to providing him with information about the villains, the man and his daughter had also given him information about heroes, like Batman and his former sidekicks. When he knocked the man unconscious, he recognized him from the Al Ghul's photos. Batman's true face is Bruce Wayne. He was eager to see how everything played out, and since Batman had no fears, he didn't think the man would take too long to learn anything about them regardless of the price. Barbara sat on one of the leather couches in the Wayne mansion and muttered, "I wonder what's taking him so long." She usually meets Bruce in the city to fight crime, but all of a sudden she was by herself on the building where they used to meet. She put on her regular clothes over her suit and went to Wayne Manor to find out what was wrong. After waiting for 30 minutes without getting him over the communicator, however, she discovered that he hadn't yet returned from his investigation. "Investigations take time," Alfred said, dusting one of the armchairs that matched the sofa and love seat. "It could be any number of things." Shortly after he finished speaking, the room's door swung open, shattering the wall behind it with its handle. Bruce entered like a man on a mission, his shirt wrinkled and untucked, his suit ruined, his tie loosened, and the other two simply stared at him. He firmly told the girl, "Suit up and get in the plane," before disappearing into one of the hidden passageways leading to the Batcave. Before the redhead chased after him, the two of them exchanged glances and saw a change in the man. Holding a cream-colored plastic device with a metal tube in the top, Naruto wondered, "This is the antidote?" "Yes, it must be inhaled to work, so I used an inhaler," said Scarecrow, nodding. As he tossed the inhaler back, the blonde hummed, "I see. Well, continue on with the plan," making the villain rush to grab it. "I shall meet you at our predetermined location, do not be late." The blonde departed through the large window across from the one-way glass that looked into the stage after Scarecrow nodded. He turned and gave his goons orders to begin packing his anti-fear toxin small tanks and preparing them for shipment. With Bruce, Batman at the stick and Barbara, Batgirl sitting behind him, the Batplane effortlessly flew over the streets of Gotham, passing between and over buildings. "Would you please tell me what's up?" Batgirl asked, leaning up to gaze at Batman from her seat without hitting anything. She had followed him to the plane, embarrassed when he undressed in front of her and put on his costume without saying anything, and irritated that he wouldn't tell her anything. It was a little strange because he had never done that before, but she did see why Bruce Wayne was one of Gotham's most sought-after men aside from his wealth, that is. He eventually informed her, "It's the Scarecrow," adding, "He's created a gas that eliminates people's fear." Batgirl repeated, making mental connections. No more fear. The guy that was swinging on the rope that night. He nodded. And the guy from my office, but imagine a whole city just like that. The idea of an entire city full of fearless men and women, free from fear and able to do as they pleased, made her grimace and look down. "Be Batman," she exclaimed as she looked up and saw a huge office building approaching. The girl leaned back in her seat, covering her face, and waited for a fiery crash. When he didn't answer, however, as Batman yanked up the controls and sent the plane skyward, she was abruptly thrust back into the seat. Before she could see a passenger jet flying in their direction, the girl sighed in relief as he banked off to the side and into the open air. Once more, Batman waited until the very last moment and withdrew, performing several spins and flips before settling in. "That gas you were talking about, the one that takes away fear, you didn't breath it in, did you?" Batgirl frowned as she leaned over the seat once more, shaking off the dizziness and suppressing a heave. Batman said, "Yes, but I can handle it." Batgirl's head struck the glass above her as the man continued to spin. She held her head while muttering sarcastically, "Really?" After landing the plane on the roof of the building where the Scarecrow kept his belongings, they started to rappel down until they reached the window leading to the room where Batman knew they kept the anti-fear gas. Batman pushed the window open and swung in with Batgirl after peeking upside down through it to see that the room was empty. Batman knelt before the cabinet, opened it, and said, "The canisters are in here," only to discover it was empty. "Here today, gone tonight," a voice said as the room's door opened and the white-suited man was leaning in the doorway. 4 black-clad men were pointing pistols at the 2 men. "If I were you, I wouldn't move," the voice said. "Well, you're not me," Batman said as he got to his feet and moved in their direction. Batgirl exclaimed, "Batman," as one of the men fired, but Batman rolled and ducked to avoid the other 2 shots. Batgirl produced a batarang, threw it, and knocked the gun from the man's grasp. The opportunity to leap forward and punch the shooter in the mouth, knocking him back and into another man, was presented by this. "Shoot him already," the man in white yelled to Batman, but the other 2 just looked at each other and fled, knocking him down in the process. Batman shot his grappling hook at the man's feet, causing it to wrap around his legs, tripping him as he staggered to his feet and began to run. "Where's the gas?" Batman glared at him as he approached and grabbed him by the shirt. "Go ahead. Throw me in jail, it won't do you any good," the man said with a sly smile. "Who said anything about jail?" smirked Batman. "What?" After yanking the man to the ground and tying one end of the rope to the conference table, Batman turned back to face the white man. The man screamed upside down in the air as he was thrown out the window without saying a word. Batgirl exclaimed, "Batman," in shock that he was putting the man's life in danger. Batman gave her a chilly look and told her to keep quiet. The man kept screaming, "Help," as Batman withdrew one of his blades. "You didn't answer my question," he said, severing the rope in 2 parts. "Fine. Fuck them. They're at the 72nd Street subway station, just help me back up." Batman put his knife away and turned to leave the man hanging there while the rope stretched farther. Batgirl saw this, grabbed the line as it broke, and struggled to pull the man up as Batman walked away. Batgirl ran after Batman and caught up with him on the roof after handcuffing the sobbing man who was swearing he would never do anything wrong again. Using her grappling hook, she tied up his upper body and caused him to fall, just like he had done to the other man. Batman growled, "This isn't the time for games," as the girl approached and grabbed his utility belt, tossing it aside and out of reach. "This isn't a game," she said. "You're out of control, you nearly killed that guy back there." He yelled, "You have no idea what you're talking about. That gas affected you more than you think. For crying out loud, you're always telling me about not going too far, but look at you. You were going to let the man fall to his death." "I told you, I can handle it." She tied the rope in a knot and yelled at him, "No you can't. You're not even afraid to kill someone. I'll be back for you as soon as I can," she said. The girl got up and began to move in the direction of the aircraft. She stopped when the man called, "Batgirl," in a softer voice than before, "It's hard for me to say this, but you did the right thing. I was out of control and you made me see that. I did what I had to." "What now?" "I have to stop Scarecrow." He said, "I can help you, I know him," but, she said, unsure whether to release him. "Don't worry, you'll be the boss on this one." After giving him a quick glance, she started to move forward but stopped. "You almost fooled me," she muttered before turning around. "Damn it. Untie me, Batgirl, you little untie me." Batman wasn't in his right mind and would do more harm than good in a fight, so Batgirl felt a little bad about doing that to him, but it was necessary. However, she was relieved that the subway station was nearby because she had no idea how to fly and didn't want to ruin it. Instead, she used the grappling hook method, which allowed her to reach the station in less than 30 minutes. When she got there, she saw some goons packing crates into the subway car. Since no one was watching, she hopped on and went in search of Scarecrow. When she finally located him, she saw the man recording while speaking into a camera. The message is for the mayor: you'll soon see what Gotham will be like without fear. It won't be pretty. Fear is what holds societies together. It's what makes people suppress their worst impulses. Fear is power, and today it'll be quite expensive if you want the antidote. After witnessing the man brandish an inhaler, Batgirl hurled a batarang at him, knocking the device from his grasp before tackling him from the chair. She pulled out another pair of handcuffs and bent the Scarecrow's arm back, saying, "You ain't getting anything from anyone." She was pulled away from him by a hand that caught her by the nape of her neck. One man thought, "Not exactly the Bat I would suspect," as he yanked the handcuffs out of her grasp. Before the cuffs were fastened around her wrists, Barbara was slammed to the ground, her arms bent behind her back, just as she had done to Scarecrow. A blond man with blue eyes and 3 scars on each cheek stared at her as she was pushed to her knees. "Now," began the man, "would you mind telling me where your partner is?" "Who are you?" she asked without responding to his query. "Leave and see if we are ready to depart," Naruto said, turning to face the Scarecrow and raising an eyebrow. The man left the two after obeying. After giving the girl another glance, Naruto took a seat in front of her. "I'll humor you and answer your question, and the answer is rather simple. I am the one whom stands between you and 5 men whom would love to brutally ravage one such as you just to spite your partner." She saw the henchman smirk at her through the window between the subway cars, as if to enforce his clam. "Choose your next words with caution, they may be the last you are able to speak without gagging." Batman snarled, "Ungrateful little." As he fought against the line that was tied around him, he knew that he couldn't break it and that a regular knife couldn't cut it easily, so he had to bring one arm to his side in order to reach the one blade he still had. Gradually, he was able to loosen his arm enough to feel the edge of the handle with the tip of his finger. He grunted, "Got it," and then he took it out and flipped it open. He would have to slowly cut at it with the blade if he didn't have the right leverage, which might take a little longer. After a frustratingly slow 25 minutes of sawing, he finally felt the line pop under his flex and was free. With a frown, he grabbed his utility belt and ran after his sidekick, who was ahead of him. He had the Batplane to help him catch up with her, though, because he hadn't taught her how to fly. When he arrived at the subway, the Batplane's wings collapsed in, making it difficult to fly while also making it thin enough to fly straight into the subway. He was tailgating the subway train because it had already left the station and he was traveling at top speed along the tracks. After unbuckling himself and pressing the autopilot, Batman climbed out, crawled to the front, and then leapt through the subway door's glass after pulling a lever that had the glass above him open. His mind was racing because of what he saw lying on the center of the walkway in front of him, even though there were a few open crates of the anti-fear toxin next to him as well as a few unopened ones. He approached it since no one else was there and picked it up to discover that it was Batgirl's blue and yellow cape. Torn from her outfit, his glance revealed a larger smear and a few spots of blood, and he was immediately forced to consider the worst scenario for the origin of the blood. Then, with his eyes narrowing, Batman stuffed the cape into one of his secret pockets and stalked up to the next railcar like a hunted animal. Since the door was closed, he paused and made a slight motion close to the window to indicate that someone was waiting to surprise him. As they waited to ambush Batman, 2 of Scarecrow's goons leaned flat against the wall near the door. Grinning broadly, they were dressed in dark matching suits, but the one on the left had a darker tan and brown slick back hair, while the other had very pale white skin, short black dreadlocks, and sunglasses. While the tanned one stood motionless as death, the pale henchman moved slightly as he considered exacting revenge on the hero. They both looked at one another after hearing a slight tapping on the metal door. They heard a louder tap. After a moment, the pale man nodded to the tanned man and leaned to peer through the glass, but Batman's gloved fist flew through it, breaking the window and the man's glasses before launching him into the air. Batman slammed the door open and stopped the brown-haired henchman from kicking him, who then kicked him again and yet another, but until he caught the last kick and dragged him back, everything was blocked. Batman glared as he stood in the other car, holding the leg between the 2 vehicles. He then grabbed the door's edge and slammed into the man's knee, causing a loud pop as he pulled to dislocate the bone. At this point, the other man got to his feet and saw what was happening. He growled and charged forward, running like a free runner on the walls and over the seats before launching a drop kick that struck Batman's chest through the broken window. As he started to duck and avoid all kinds of blows from the monkey-like fighter, the hero was forced to let go of the other man, who collapsed with a hiss of agony. With a loud pop, The tanned man snapped his bone back into place with a growl and got to his feet, limping only slightly. The tanned man entered Batman's sights with a vicious straight punch that scraped his mask as Batman was able to counterattack the untamed monkey-like man and knock him back a few feet into a row of seats. Were these goons far more skilled than normal, or was it just him? As he attempted to uppercut the man, he thought to himself, but the man leaned aside like a boxer while the man was stunned. Batman went low, punched him hard in the gut, grabbed him, and slammed him into one of the open crates. His skull then struck one of the metal canisters, which Batman then used to throw the man out the back of the subway car. He was warned of an attack by a loud yell, and as his attack hit the area he had just left, he rolled up onto one of the crates. Batman grabbed a canister and swung it, causing the man to backflip onto his hands before kicking forward to stand again. The man landed after swinging once more, but he was unable to dodge and was struck in the side of the head by the metal canister, which caused him to fly out one of the windows. Batman discovered a few more henchmen on his way to the front of the subway, but none were as dangerous as the first two. He got the jump on Scarecrow as he was working on the controls of the front car, which broke them, causing them to speed up and crash through a wooden barricade that indicated the tracks were out. Fighting against the hero's hold, the villain screamed, "You fool! You'll get us killed." "Where is Batgirl? What have you done with her?" Batman asked sarcastically. "Not trying to scare me, are you?" Before putting his hand around the man's throat. The Scarecrow was choking to death due to Batman's tight grip, so he was unable to respond. Scarecrow screamed at the man's hands, fighting for even a tiny breath, but the hold on his windpipe was too tight. Scarecrow shakily grabbed the first object he could find and struck Batman in the face, but it turned out to be the inhaler containing the antidote. When Batman regained his ability to fear a Euro, including turning into a murderary Euro, the hit caused it to spray, and he jumped back with a coughing fit. He looked up after a moment and gasped when he saw that they had emerged from the tunnel, coming out close to a cliff that was rapidly approaching them. Before the subway could launch itself off the tracks and into the water far below, he hurried to the back of the plane, picked up the now conscious villain, and leapt off and onto it. He was more concerned with the fact that Batgirl had not been on the train and that they could not have concealed her there because the spaces were too small, and he would have seen her by then than he was with the damage. Batgirl fought against her restraints and swore that ropes had been used in place of her handcuffs as she lay on the floor of an unfamiliar, dim room. Additionally, instead of just having handcuffs around her wrists, she now had ropes securely fastened around both her ankles and feet, with another connecting them from behind, preventing her from moving almost at all. Since she had woken up feeling the cold floor against her skin and realized she was nearly completely nude a Euro, from the feel of it, she still had her mask on and her underwear on a Euro. She didn't really care that a gag had been placed in her mouth to prevent her from speaking. Had they raped her while she was out? That icy feeling of dread ran through her veins. For fun, did they intend to keep her around? They couldn't have raped her because she didn't feel any pain other than the pain of being knocked out. Her thighs weren't sore, and she didn't feel any different than before. Not yet, anyway. Then she recalled Bruce had taught her how to get away from them as part of their training, and she used that knowledge to attack her captor and flee. She eliminated a couple more before the blonde defeated her once more, and then everything was blank. "You're awake," the blonde's voice said, emerging from the shadows. "Good. We still have much to speak of, and here we shall not be interrupted." Naruto pulled a chair behind him and sat down as he came into her line of sight. He leaned over and pulled the gag out of her mouth, exposing it to be a piece of her costume. "Your last attempt was admirable, but in vain. You won't get out of my grasp, little bat, until I let it," he added. She asked hastily, "Where am I? Why am I nearly necked? Where are my clothes?" "You are in a dark room where no one will hear you scream," Naruto said, raising an eyebrow. After a moment of reflection, he added, making her insides freeze, "As for your clothing, well, I'd rather not risk another escape attempt, and before you begin to accuse me of it, no, I did not rape you, nor did I allow you to be raped by another." "Then why am I necked?" The blonde's eyes were narrowed. "For one, in your position, you ask many questions. I left you in your underwear to remind you that you are no longer in control. The mask, however, well, I just wanted you to be awake when I rip it off." She started to say something, but he interrupted her by drawing a tiny pocket knife. He laughed. "Good. Now that you're finished with all your irritating questions, I can speak. I originally planned on leading your partner on many a wild goose chase, but you showing up has altered that plan. Now I need to reveal my hand just a bit." Standing, the man knelt down over her and held the knife to her ear. Long ago, when one wished to make another listen, they would kidnap their closest friend and send them a severed ear. Barbara trembled because she thought he might actually cut off her ear. He then proceeded, gently guiding the blade's point down her neck into the strap of her bra, saying, "But luckily for you, I no longer have to scar your beautiful face." She shook even more when the strap was cut with a tiny pop. Naruto laughed. How amusing, but don't worry, I only need a rather convincing picture. The blonde took a tiny camera out of his pants pocket and took some pictures of her frightened face and some that revealed her bare body. Before departing, Naruto got up and turned away, his parting words reverberating in her mind. Enjoy your stay, Barbara Gordon. After yet another unsuccessful search of the city, Batman came home with a growl and punched the wall of his foyer. Barbara had been missing for 2 days, and he and Alfred had been working non-stop ever since. Alfred said, "You look terrible, sir," and asked, "I take it that your lead was also a dead end?" Sighing, Bruce said, "I'm used to sleepless nights. You don't look too good either." He had removed the cowl. It was the truth. Although Alfred usually exuded the primness and propriety that one would expect from a butler, his face was starting to age. His face was starting to show a 5 o'clock shadow. His eyes had bags and dark circles under them, and his suit was wrinkled as though he hadn't changed. "I've had my fair share of late nights," the elderly gentleman thought, "but never with something like this going on. I've been going over everything I could on the mainframe, trying to track Ms. Gordon or see if anything strange was going on, but I found no clue. If anything, I've heard about you. The most crime is at an all-time low." Bruce rubbed his weary eyes. He had been searching the city for hints, revealing a darker, more determined side of himself to Gotham when he discovered a criminal. The last few had been discovered with broken bones and missing teeth, but normally he would just cuff them and leave them for the police. "It's okay, Alfred, we'll find her." After cleaning himself up and walking as though half dead, the man collapsed in his armchair. He knew Alfred would get it for him, so he remained motionless when the doorbell rang. "To Bruce Wayne," Alfred said as he entered a moment later, holding a thick pocket envelope with the words, "Sir, a messenger just dropped this off, said it was to go directly to you." He opened the flap after examining the envelope and bending the metal clasps that held it shut, only to have a smaller envelope with a letter fall onto his lap. After giving Alfred the smaller envelope to open, he turned the letter over to the front and was shocked by what he saw written there. "To Batman, oh my." The man cried as Alfred had already opened the other envelope and taken out its contents. It was Batgirl's Euro. No, it was Barbara Gordon's Mosca Euro, and it contained images of her both in and out of her mask. Bruce tore open the letter and started reading it after seeing the mask and the photos. How far would someone go to save a stranger? Ask yourself, how far can I make you go to save your partner and the police commissioner's daughter? Nothing unsightly has happened to the girl as of yet, but you can decide whether or not she remains that way. It doesn't matter how you do it, but you have to do something for me if you want her to come back alive. You have spent innumerable hours of your life and countless sums of money battling crime and apprehending criminals in Gotham. You will now take the opposite action. The Scarecrow, the villain you captured 2 days ago, is now imprisoned at Arkham Asylum. Once more, I now want to know if putting one person's safety at risk would put many others in danger. The girl won't be hurt if the Scarecrow is released. After a week, Bruce was forced to follow instructions after receiving a new letter every day with new directives. At best, they were arbitrary, and nothing seemed to be related anymore. He had to destroy a drug shipment in the dockyard, and another time he had to steal something or sabotage police cars. When he returned home from work, he was greeted by Alfred, who was looking solemn and holding another letter. "Let's see what I have to do," he sighed, beginning to believe that the person who was writing these had been playing him and that he would never see Barbara again. "Another great performance, Mr. Wayne. If it weren't for your annoying morals, you'd make a pretty good villain. This is Ida Euro. The last task you've been looking forward to. You'll understand if you find the unmarked white van in the parking garage of your business building." Since the sun was still shining, Bruce decided to drive one of his regular cars to work. In a suit, after all, he owned the business, so he didn't need to break in. He saw the white van as soon as he pulled into the parking garage and got out to check it out. The windows were tinted, so he couldn't see inside, but when he opened the back, he was relieved to see Barbara lying there naked, gagged and tied up but unharmed. The girl began to cry as he untied her and took off the gag, putting her arms around him and sobbing into his shirt. Unaware of the smirking blonde sitting in a meditative position on the hood of another car, Bruce took off his coat, covered her, assisted her into the car, and drove away. "Until we cross paths again, little bat," he thought to himself before resting his hands behind his head and leaning back against the windshield. "Sir?" The blonde opened one eye and peered at the person who had been crouched by the tire from around the corner. It was the silent, brown-haired henchman who had been ejected from the train after fending off Batman for some time. Batman should have killed the henchman because he broke his back and many other bones from ragdolling on the ground when he threw him out the back, hitting the plane that was following him first. Before Naruto discovered him, he had crawled down the track for a considerable distance. He healed him, and the man vowed to be loyal to the blonde, Even if it meant dying for him, this man was his Ras Al Ghul and, in a way, his Yubu. Yes, Joseph? Do you wish for me to dispose of the van? The man departed after Naruto nodded, going to an abandoned lot. He would burn the inside of the van where Barbara had been taken, and then leave it there. Joseph reminded Naruto of his former cults and was a good little human, so he grinned. The man was a former Russian soldier who was proficient in 2 martial arts forms. Sambo, which he first learned, and another that he later acquired, Taekwondo, he thought. The van took off. He had no concern that it would be linked to them after all. He doubted that the owners had even noticed it missing when it was stolen a few hours prior, and by the time it was reported, the object would be leaking fire from the windows. Alfred sighed as he gazed at his boss, who was sound asleep in the Batcave, hunched over the keyboard of his enormous supercomputer. He couldn't recall how many times he had witnessed the man act in this manner, but typically there would be a few days between each incident. But today was the 4th day in a row that he had refused to get out of that chair. He slept and ate there, only getting up to use the restroom. Bruce's growing facial hair caused the ever-loyal butler to frown inwardly as he woke him up from his slumber with a mug and a fresh pot of coffee. Bruce rubbed his face and eyes and whispered, "I wasn't sleeping, just resting my eyes." "Must have been a nice rest," the man said, raising an eyebrow, as he poured the coffee. "Seeing as you snored for 6 hours, he thought." Bruce complained as he accepted the offered cup and took a sip. "You should really get some real sleep, sir," Alfred said after a while. "Not that I mind having to walk down here every morning to wake you, but you haven't had a proper bath in days." "I know, Alfred, it's just that," he concluded for his boss, "the business with this unknown person kidnapping Ms. Gordon and knowing your true identity?" The man merely gave a nod. "Well, sir, I'm just grateful that nothing truly god-awful happened to her." "Me too. I've been trying to find any information on this person that I can," Bruce stated to him while sipping his coffee. The van that was used was reported stolen that day and was later found under the highway. The inside was completely incinerated. Alfred said, "What about the messages?" "Each was written by the same person, but the messenger was always different but had the same story. All were approached by a hooded man and offered $300 to deliver them and ask no questions." After a prolonged period of inactivity, the screen had turned off, so Bruce snapped the bones in his neck back on and turned it on again. "Scarecrow knows something but won't talk. I questioned him before and he seems more afraid of whoever this mystery person is than he is of Batman. And they must be connected, after all. The letter did demand that you release him after you had him arrested. And I think that Barbara knows something too, but I'd rather not push her after all that's happened. How is she anyway?" he said, nodding in agreement with Alfred's ideas. "Better," Alfred said. "She's starting to get back to her usual self. Luckily she doesn't have to go back to college anytime soon and has been talking to her father over the phone when he can." "The commissioner still investigating his units?" "Indeed, from what I could gather, Commissioner Gordon is personally looking into the new rumors of corruption. Apparently someone has been taking bribes and covering things up." Someone in a hoodie approached a parked car and knocked on the driver's side window while hiding in one of Gotham's many alleyways. The hooded man leaned down as the window rolled down halfway. "Hey men, you got a nice car," he thought, before pointing a pistol at the driver and saying, "How about I take it off your hands?" He couldn't see the driver, only that he was dressed in a suit, making him an easy target for a carjacker. The driver chuckled and said, "You are making a big mistake," before pointing in front of him. The carjacker turned to see a policeman pointing a gun at him. He attempted to talk himself out of getting arrested by saying, "Oh shit, look man, I was just messing around." As she cocked the hammer of her pistol, a female voice called out, "On your knees now," to the officer. The carjacker noticed that the driver was now pointing a gun at him after hearing another gun cock. He thought, "I do as the lady says," and laughed. "Fuck man, please, I can't go to jail," the carjacker said, dropping his pistol and falling to his knees for help. The driver pondered, "Don't worry, you won't be going there anytime soon." The carjacker was now able to see the driver's smirking lower half behind the gun barrel from his lowered elevation before a bullet got stuck in his chest and he fell on his back against the wall. "That is. Fucking carjackers, I don't even work those cases anymore and they're still fucking my day up," said the female police officer as she approached, her pistol in one hand. She then holstered her gun, took the carjacker, and shot him in the head. "My master sends his regards," the driver said, putting away his own gun and extending a thick yellow envelope to the woman. "Yeah, would ever just make sure you keep on paying me," she said, opening the flap and looking inside to reveal a pile of cash. "Of course. Master always makes sure that those who work for him are repaid," the driver said with ease. "Just keep on doing what you were and you'll keep on getting paid." As the car drove away, the female police officer shrugged, tucked her hands into her coat, and left. With a gulp, Scarecrow realized he was facing his blonde boss after being broken out of prison. He went into hiding, and he had no idea how the man had discovered him. Since the man had discovered him, he was, in all honesty, expecting to die because he had failed to complete his task. The blonde said ominously, "I'm most displeased with you, Scarecrow. Standing close to a window that overlooked a street and was partially broken and badly boarded up. I had you broken out of your prison, and yet the first thing you did was hide. Sir, please let me explain. After failing the plan with the subway, I expected nothing less than failure from you regarding the plan. I just need you to distract Batman for the time being," Naruto yelled, forcing the villain to quickly shut his mouth. "But the fact of the matter is that you hid when you were called." Scarecrow was about to say, "But sir," when Naruto suddenly materialized in front of him, snatching him by the neck, lifting him off the ground, and choking him. Naruto hissed, "Have I told you to speak?" Scarecrow was tossed aside after giving a feeble shake of his head. "You'd do well to follow your orders," he growled. "You are far from irreplaceable, and the only thing keeping you alive as of now is the fact that your mind contains information that is not as replaceable." Then Naruto turned to face the location where the Scarecrow had decided to hide, an old Halloween shop. How original. Children's and adult-sized costumes were arranged in rows upon rows. The floor was littered with crates of wigs, fake blood, false teeth, costume paint, and other various items. Some even spilled out onto the floor. The blonde master kicked a nearby crate, causing it to explode in a shower of splinters as many old prepackaged costumes flew into the wall, and Scarecrow slowly pushed himself up from where he landed and glanced over. After a moment, Naruto said, "Let this ordeal be a warning to you," in a much more composed and calm voice. "When called, you will come, for if I must hunt you down once more." The man nodded fearfully and stammered another apology as he let the statement hang for him to finish on his own. "Now that we understand one another, feel free to continue cowering. I have no use for you at the time. When you gain the courage to do so, feel free to continue what it is that you normally do. Oh, and remember that if you speak of me to a would-be law enforcement dog or to a hero, well." The statement was left unfinished once more, but this time the blonde's smirk revealed sharpened fangs. Naruto never really stayed in one spot for very long during his time in Gotham because he found sleep to be one of those things that he enjoyed but rarely needed. So when he did, the location changed occasionally. He would occasionally sleep in an empty apartment, on a sturdy tree branch, or even on top of a subway train while the wind blew through his hair. Unlike some of the weaker-tailed demon lords, he was never overly concerned with pride and vanity. He didn't require a commanding stronghold to demonstrate his might or hordes of devotees who worshipped the air he breathed. While they were nice to have, they weren't necessary in the end. However, now that he had a devoted fan, he had a more permanent housing arrangement. His faithful soldier opened the door for him and said, "I apologize that my home is small, sir, but that is all I can do for you." Naruto walked around the apartment and noticed that it wasn't a penthouse suite, but it also wasn't one of the many inexpensive one-room deals that most places had. It featured a small kitchenette on one side and a living room with a bedroom and bathroom connected to it. However, Naruto could also see that he was a single man because the floor was filthy. There was laundry all over the furniture and floor, and there were paper plates piled on the table, some of which contained moldy food. When the soldier Joseph noticed him observing the unclean area, he promised to have it cleaned as soon as possible. The blonde nodded, unconcerned because he had previously lived in worse circumstances. However, he was at a loss for options. After a moment, he said to the man, "Go out and buy some new stuff, and use some of the money that's left over from the case." The brown-haired man said, "Yes, sir," and then he turned to clean the area for his boss. Naruto entered the living room and peered out the window while Joseph was tidying up. Although one could argue whether Gotham had a best part or not, the apartment wasn't in the best area of the city. He could see cars passing over 30 stories below, people going about their daily lives as if there were no danger of a superpowered villain attacking. Then Naruto began to reflect. It hadn't begun that way, but his intentions had inexplicably shifted from doing whatever he wanted and controlling Batman to possibly even more occupying Gotham, not to mention that he would have to get his hands dirty if he wanted to follow through. With his eyes fixed on the city outside the window, he yelled, "Joseph, tell me, what other business opportunities have you heard about while working as a henchman?" "Well, there was this guy who said he had work," the man from the adjacent room replied. "He worked for someone named Boss Biggies, something about an illegal mining operation in the desert." "Mining, and what, pray tell, were they mining?" "Gold ore, I think." Anyone would have noticed a smirking blonde with two bright red eyes if they had been looking out the window. The mining camp, which was surrounded by high fences and included a few old houses and what appeared to be guard towers, was situated directly next to a sizable canyon in the middle of a blazing desert. 5 small metal boxes with air holes in the side stood next to one tower, directly in front of a fence where there was no real shade. Boss Biggies was a big, whale-sized man who wore a purple undershirt with numerous stains on it and a white suit, while some of his own goons stood around dressed like ranchers or cowboys. He sat at a table laden with food and dishes that he dug into like a starving man. The man glared at the 2 people across from him and slammed his meaty fists into the table, shouting, "What, you think that you can come here and start making demands?" he said. His soldier stood close to Naruto, who sat at the other end of the table. Now he was dressed like the others, complete with a black cowboy hat to make him look like a cowboy. "Of course I don't think that," he thought, smirking and crossing his legs. "I know you'll follow my instructions, so from now on, you'll give me 25% of everything you make, or a lot of bad things will happen to you." The fat man snarled, "Is that a threat?" and turned to face one of his men leaning against the wall. Naruto snatched a steak knife from the table and threw it at the man as he began to pull the revolver he carried on his hip. After seeing his man fall to the ground with a knife stuck in his eye, Biggies turned to face the blonde, who was grinning and brandishing a butter knife. Care to send another to their unfortunate end? 4 other people were present in the room, and they all began attacking Naruto, killed them all and disappeared, only to reappear in his chair with the bloody butter knife in his hand as the 4 bodies fell, splattering blood across the wooden floor. After stabbing the knife into the table and glancing at the now pale Biggies, Naruto picked up a glass cup and set it on the table directly in front of him. "Any more?" he asked. Biggies gave a headshake. "Good," Naruto murmured. "Now, I'll be expecting a payment soon. Make me wait and we'll find out how long it takes for vultures to pick through the layers of fat you have before reaching your insides." With one leg crossed over the other and a less than amused expression on his face, Naruto sat at the table across from Biggies and asked ominously, "Care to explain as to why I found my previous payment lacking?" As he chewed a big mouthful, the incredibly obese man held a large turkey leg in his hand and appeared unconcerned by the menacing-looking blonde across from him. With his mouth full and food scraps flying out of it and onto the table, he replied, "What do you want me to say? I don't have that many workers and gave you part of what I got plus. Can't you see that I'm doing all the work around here?" The blonde's gaze narrowed. "All I see before me is a greedy, lazy, unkempt, fat slob making excuses. 2 weeks you've run this operation for that long and yet all I've seen is a few thousand." Biggies shrugged and reached for the ceramic gravy pot, but a less than pleased demon lord slapped it out of his hand. "We ain't mining that much," he said. It struck the wooden wall hard enough to break the board and shatter it, spilling its contents all over the floor. He hissed at the man, his eyes crimson. "Do you take me for a fool? I've looked at your papers and you've made quite a lot of money here, and you've even started to tunnel deeper into the ground." With a swallow, Biggies turned to look at the shotgun he was leaning against the wall. As Joseph cocked the hammer of his pistol, which was holstered on his belt, Naruto sneered, "Try it, it shall be the last mistake you ever make." In an attempt to get the blonde to return to the subject of money and avoid murder, the man wisely decided not to try it and wiped the perspiration from his brow before asking, "How much do you want now?" "Half of what you have now and from henceforth, 25 every month," the demon said with a sly hum. "What?" exclaimed the man. "You can't do that, that will set us back." "I believe that I just did," replied Naruto. "It's a far kinder deal than literally taking an arm and a leg, don't you say?" The blonde had a "dare me" smirk on her face as she held the carving knife close to the turkey in the center of the table. Biggies immediately complied with the blonde's demands and sent his goon to collect the money from the illicit gold sales, which he had secured in a sizable safe. Soon after, the man brought back a money bag, and Naruto, looking down at the perspiring criminal, instructed Joseph to check it. Joseph said, "It's good, boss," after he pounded through half of the rolls in stacks. "And if you still feel that I cheated, you go to the authorities and tell them about it," Naruto said, nodding, before rising to leave and turning to face the man. "Good. Then it seems that I shall be hearing from you soon." Ignoring the stares from the laborers who were being detained there against their will, the 2 departed the camp and made their way to the rented jeep that Joseph had been given to drive through the sand in. As they threw the money bag in the back of the car and got inside, Joseph questioned, "Do you think that he'll pay, sir?" He sighed, "It matters not, I will have it and it shall be his choice either to hand it over or have it ripped from his cold dead hands." Naruto stood outside the airport, sniffing the air and humming as he changed back into his hooded jacket, jeans, And shoes. After a brief flight back to Gotham, his eyes searched the area for the source and settled on a scrawny boy with black hair and pale skin. The most peculiar aspect was that the boy's head had a bowl cut, with two parts curving up like horns on either side. However, the cat he held in his arms was the one who really captured his interest, not the boy. Its dark brown fur had angular black stripes that resembled lightning bolts. "Sir?" asked Joseph, who had gone to retrieve his car from the airport parking lot and opened the door for him. Naruto turned to face the man and instructed him to take the day off and continue without him. The man was obviously a little taken aback by this, but he accepted the money and departed as instructed, leaving the blonde at the airport. When a black limousine arrived for the teenager, Naruto went over as the boy got inside, grabbed the door before it could be closed, and got himself. When the boy saw him, he arched an eyebrow and then spoke in a high-pitched voice that sounded haughty and said, "I'm better than you. You must be lost, stranger. This is my vehicle. I suggest you find your own and leave." "Oh, I am far from lost, child," said Naruto, merely wondering the fact as to why you hold a feline demon in your arms. The boy grinned and said, "Ah, I see. Are you another one of those demon hunters?" Naruto laughed, "Far from it, but I do wonder as to why a little human is in the company of a demon. No, I see it now, little witch." The cat hissed at the blonde as the fur on its back started to stand up. The cat shrank into itself in terror as Naruto's eyes narrowed at it, and he returned the gesture, growling like a beast and turning red. "I sense it now," he thought as he saw that old occult magic flowing through you. With wide open eyes, the boy said, What are you?" His crimson eyes seemed to pierce the boy's very soul as he cooed darkly, "I am a demon of old, the nine-tailed fox, better known as the Lord of Ninth. And you, little witch, are an anomaly. Magic, even the most simplistic of such, has long since become an arcane art, and even in a city such as Gotham your presence is strange. So tell me why you've come here. In fact, what might your name be, little witch?" The boy stammered, "K. Clarion," pronounced Clarion, then cleared his throat to hide his display of weakness when he summoned and successfully bound the cat demon to him. He was aware that displaying weakness in the presence of strong demons could result in death, as some of his old books had taught him. However, despite spending so much time close to a demon, he had never encountered one as strong as this one up close. Indeed, he was aware of this demon. One of the oldest books he was able to read before it was lost to time described a powerful fox with 9 tails that had the ability to unleash unimaginable chaos and destruction with a single flick of its tail. "I've returned here after amassing a fortune great enough to ensure that I can acquire an item that is up for auction." "Oh, is that so? And what did your parents say about this?" "Nothing, seeing as I've turned them into mice quite some time ago," Clarion grinned in response. His demon cat hissed as though to bolster his assertion, and she opened her mouth to purport that she had eaten them after hearing about it. Naruto laughed. You've sparked my interest, little witch. How about we make a deal?" Leaning forward slightly, Clarion heard the blonde make a proposal to him. So, Naruto thought for a moment before extending his hand to the boy, his fingernails having just grown into claws. "Do we have an accord?" he asked. Clarion accepted the offered hand without hesitation, but he winced as the blonde dug his claws into his flesh before yelling in agony as if he had been set on fire. Naruto let go of the boy and laughed as Clarion collapsed to the ground. Trembling, his shoulders started to shake with laughter as the boy kept doing this for a few seconds before he calmed down and his cat cautiously approached. With a sly smile, Clarion raised his head and opened his eyes, revealing to the smirking blonde that they had turned a sinister red. It turns out that Clarion's mother was a stay-at-home mother who enjoyed the glitzy lifestyle of a wealthy socialite, while his father was formerly a wealthy businessman in Gotham. Since it had been paid off, Clarion had been residing in the modest mansion they had owned on the outskirts of Gotham after he divorced his parents. Clarion, who was pampered and uninformed about business practices, quickly discovered that he was losing money as the company collapsed and went bankrupt. The fact that the boy had a mansion that could meet his needs and allow him to leave that tiny apartment was all that Naruto really cared about, since he would need to be close to the boy for the duration of their agreement. Clarion would obviously not mind if he moved in. He blinked as he entered the tiny apartment and saw that 5 people were watching TV while seated on the couch or the floor. While Joseph looked on in confusion, there were several backpacks or duffel bags on the ground, stuffed with clothes and other stuff. When one of the group saw him, he leapt from the couch and landed on his knees, pressing his forehead against the carpet. "Oh, great master!" he exclaimed, and the other 4 people did the same. "Joseph," Naruto began, examining the 5 before turning to face the man. "Who might these people be?" he asked. "They said that they were members of the Order of the Ninth," said the individual. "They refused to leave and wouldn't budge until they saw you." "Who do you worship?" Naruto hummed as he heard this and glanced down at the 5 bowing individuals. They all chanted, "You my lord," simultaneously. "My lord, we've traveled a long way to find you and searched for days. Please forgive us for taking so long to find you," said their leader, the man who bowed first, gazing up at him with joyous eyes. "I see. Well then I will find some use of you. First of all get your things, we are moving," Naruto said after giving them all a brief, observant glance. Joseph stayed behind while the 5 cultists rushed to follow instructions. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, where are we going?" The man was staring at Naruto. "We're heading out to a new base, a mansion at that now. Go and procure a vehicle, something that'll hold everyone, I'll be resting." Naruto grabbed one of his female worshippers by the arm as he went by and carried her with him as he made his way to the bedroom. After a month, Naruto had essentially occupied Clarion's mansion without any opposition, since the only occupant of the house had only used a few of the rooms during his lifetime. His group of fervent cultists and devoted soldiers also took their own rooms there and spent most of their time trying to improve their master's new home by cleaning the dust that had accumulated over the rooms over the many years. Clarion looked up to the blonde as a student with the master, and he voluntarily underwent any training that was given to him as he started learning how to use the demonic power that Naruto had given him. Again, Naruto commanded, observing the boy create a massive ball of red energy in his palms. Focusing on the assault, Clarion launched it toward a tree, where it exploded and split the massive trunk in two like a twig. The attack was a much weaker and less destructive version of the Biju bomb, which was used by powerful demons. Although the boy had finally reached the peak of his attack, comparing it to a fully functional Biju bomb would be like comparing an atomic bomb to a regular missile. "Good work, little witch," said the brunette. "You've reached a proficient level for this to be of use. Go and clean yourself up. That auction starts in a few hours." One of the auctioneers stood up on a stage behind a large table and gestured to Bruce, who had been standing close to the stage's edge. "We here at Gotham Auctioneers would like to thank Mr. Wayne for his generous donation that made this all possible," the auctioneer said. Bruce nodded and grinned at the rows of seats occupied by a number of well-dressed, well-preserved socialites and history buffs. "Please feel free to look around at our prized collection of artifacts on display. The auction will begin very soon." There were guardrails at one end to prevent someone from falling into the seats from where their displays were placed, and a flight of stairs connected the two sections of seats, leading down to the auctioneer stage. Bruce ascended those stairs to Barbara's position, where she was examining a set of real medieval knight armor while sporting a sleeveless blue dress. "Thanks for inviting me here, Bruce," she said as she turned to see him standing there. "I was surprised that you agreed to come. You usually don't come to these things," he responded. With a shrug, the girl said, "I just felt like getting out of the house for a while, although I didn't think that I'd be the only one my age here." Before turning to face a boy a few years younger than her, she saw him examining an antique set of brass pots with mean designs on them. Or maybe not. "Why don't you go talk to him?" "I have to go talk to someone," Bruce said, turning to face the boy she was observing. After Bruce left, Barbara approached the younger man and said, "So did your parents drag you here or something?" "I beg your pardon," the boy said, rubbing the brown cat in his arms as he turned to face her with his piercing black eyes. "Did your parents make you come here? I'm here by myself." Her attempt to make friends was not going as well as she had hoped, so she muttered, "Oh, well, at least you have Kitty to keep you company." When Barbara reached out to touch the animal, it hissed and swiped at her hand, and the boy watched with a covert chuckle, pulling her hand back. She barely avoided the set of claws, but when it hissed again, she grimaced, as though it were taunting her and urging her to try again. It was almost time for the auction to start, as the lights surrounding the exhibit and the seats grew dimmer. The auctioneer announced over the speaker system, "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and make yourselves comfortable. We are now ready to begin." The man on stage opened a protective case that had been moved up onto the table, and Clarion smirked and walked around the girl without saying anything, pausing at the top of the stairs. As he held up the item, the auctioneer told the audience, "Tonight we offer a number of fascinating artifacts of the so-called Dark Ages." The branding iron was nearly 2.5 feet long with a Gothic M in the center. It was divided into two smaller bars that joined to a round end. The group of potential bidders laughed when the man said, "The suggested opening bid is 10,000, after joking, "The first item on the block is this. It is rumored to have been the personal branding iron of the Arthurian witch Morgan Le Fay. Legend has it that this piece has some sort of magical power. Gotham Auctioneers makes no such guarantee." 100,000. They all began muttering and whispering about the young man as they turned to see him coming down the stairs while holding his cat and wearing a confident expression. "I said, 100,000, Clarion repeated as he turned and sat down on the right side of the room. The auctioneer recognized the boy and said, "Ah, Master Clarion, good to see you again, and the opening bid is 100,000. Soon afterward, Barbara noticed Bruce seated across the room and approached him, taking a seat beside him as she gazed at the young man. She said to Bruce in a whisper, "That kid has 100 grand?" Everyone was concentrating on Clarion, so nobody paid much attention when the blonde in the black suit and overcoat slipped into the room and smirked while seated in one of the back row's chairs. Already pleased that the requested price had more than tripled, the auctioneer turned to face the room and started talking, hoping that someone else would place a higher bid. "Do I hear?" A man said, 110. As everyone turned to look at the bidder, the muttering began again this time. The man was older and wore a brown suit underneath a black sweater. His hair was jet black and short, but it had a blood-red streak in the middle, along with dark red, almost black hair and a white streak in the shape of a lightning bolt. 110 is the bid from Mr. Blood, was his? After placing the bid, Jason Blood lowered his hand and nodded to the auctioneer. 120, Clarion said as he leaned back after glancing up at Jason Blood. The other man said, 130, without pausing. 140, 150, Clarion narrowed his eyes and looked to the side, where he saw the man frowning at him from the corner of his eye. The boy raised his hand and bid, 250, grinning at the man's abrupt expression of surprise before grimacing and tying his fingers together. Going once, going twice, 1 million, said Bruce, raising his hand. Before giving the man a covert death glare, Clarion's eyes widened, wondering why the man had placed the bid. Naruto, who had been seated in the back, arched an eyebrow at him. Naruto noticed Bruce nodding to Jason Blood as he turned in his chair. As Bruce was given the case with the brand he had purchased, Barbara asked, "So what are you going to do? Buy a herd of cattle and use it on them?" she said. "No," Bruce said, grinning slightly, "this was to assist a friend." The girl pondered, some friend, wondering what kind of friend Bruce had that would have allowed him to spend that much money even though he was wealthy. "You don't know the half of it." As Clarion approached the couple and absently rubbed his cat, he said, "Exquisite craftsmanship, isn't it, Mr. Wayne? Enjoy it while you can," he said. Bruce's eyes narrowed at the sound. "Who are?" Bruce and Barbara said, Clarion, as they turned to face Jason Blood approaching from behind. "Why am I not surprised to see you here?" they asked. The boy sneered and turned away, thinking, "We do have a way of bumping into each other, Uncle Jason," adding, "Next time it'll be on purpose." Bruce turned to the other man and grinned as he greeted him, Jason, taking the man's hand and shaking it after watching the boy leave with a frown on his face. "Bruce, thanks for stepping in." "It was nothing," the hero replied, "but tell me, how'd you get a brat like that for a nephew?" Jason scowled and shook his head, saying, "We're not related. He finds it funny to call me uncle for some reason, but don't underestimate him, he'll do anything to get what he wants." "Surely his parents. Don't expect any help from them," Jason said. The little witch boy turned him into mice. "You're not serious then? Who's he talking to?" Bruce asked Clarion after turning to face Jason. The other man turned to see Clarion conversing with a blond man in a black overcoat while standing close to the exit. "I don't know, I've never seen him before." Naruto met his pupil close to the door and said, "You know what has to be done." "There is no issue," Clarion said, turning to face the three. Tinkle, who is similar to Tinkle but uses a E instead of a in, will get it for me right under their noses. The cat in question appeared to purr in agreement with her master as Naruto looked at it. "We shall see." Bruce and Barbara left Gotham Auctioneers and accompanied Jason Blood to his house for a conversation after bringing them to his study. Jason carefully set the brand on his desk across from the window, next to a few glass vials. The study was a sizable space surrounded by various medieval artifacts. The walls were adorned with stone statues, paintings of castles, a suit of armor, and a few shields and swords. Jason said to his friend, "Thanks again, Bruce. I'll repay you someday, though it might be a while," as Bruce stood close by. Looking to the side where Barbara had gone, Bruce said, "Let's just call it a professional courtesy." She had found herself staring at a stone statue of a monster's head the size of a basketball on a mantel. Barbara found herself examining the statue closely and asking, "Excuse me, but what is this?" Jason grinned as he approached. "That's Merlin's demon, Etrigan," replied Jason. "He summoned it to defend the realm of Camelot, Merlin's home. But when Camelot finally fell, Merlin decided to keep the demon in the service of humanity and merged the creature with one of King Arthur's noblemen." In the middle of the story, Bruce approached and listened to the statue without noticing the brown cat leap onto the desk and paw silently in the direction of the branding iron. Barbara leaned to the side and noticed that there was something carved into the back. "There's something on the other side," she said. It looks just like you. She blinked as she reached over and slid the statue around to reveal another carved face. You think? Asked Jason, looking amused. Hey Jason, replied Bruce. You said something about Merlin summoning demons. Do you know anything about the demon worshipped by a cult known as the Cult of the Ninth? Teakle grabbed the brand between her teeth and started to head for the window to get out, but the brand's handle knocked one of the vials off the desk, shattering it. After hearing this at the conclusion of his inquiry, Bruce turned to see the brand being held by the cat Clarion had been carrying around. The cat hissed as he ran over and grabbed the handle in time to snatch it away. The man leaned back and out of Teakle's way as she leapt at him and swiped her claws. When the cat touched down, Bruce turned to see it standing up and starting to change as he transformed. His body appeared to turn gray and black, becoming taller than a typical man but assuming a female form. Her ears, claws, fangs, and brown fur were all still present, but they had grown larger. Her face and belly were now off-white, and her characteristic high-pitched hisses sounded more menacing and deep than before. Teakle leapt with twice the grace and agility as before, missed the man with her first claw swipe, landed on the desk, and then threw a backhand to knock him back. Bruce moaned when the fist struck him and knocked him to the ground, but before he could react, he noticed that she was aiming a lethal claw at him. He attempted to retreat, but he stumbled over a vase and fell as the cat demon dug her claws into the wall. Bruce hit the ground hard and lost his hold on the brand, which the demon quickly grabbed. Barbara shouted, "Hey kitty," in the middle of a dropkick. When Teakle turned and saw this, he quickly grabbed her ankle and threw her into Bruce, who stopped her as she slid to the ground. The cat demon turned and attempted to jump out of the window, but Bruce rushed forward, grabbed her by the foot, and attempted to pull her back. She turned and swung the brand, hitting the man in the face after hissing and spitting. As this occurred, Jason stepped back and closed his eyes, chanting, "Gone, gone the form of man," before opening them to reveal red, solid eyes that glowed. Rise the demon Etrigan. Similar to the cat, his body transformed into shadows and his suit tore and changed with him until Etrigan, a massive demon who was nearly 6.5 feet tall but hunched over, appeared to be made of solid clay-colored muscle. He wore a red tunic and matching sock-like shoes, and finally, a long, faded black cape that fell to his ankles. Before Etrigan ran to stop the cat and assist Bruce, Barbara watched the transformation in a state of shock. As she attempted to move, she noticed that the broken pieces of vase that Bruce had tripped over had severely cut her leg as she had fallen on them. She was concerned that her leg might be broken, but the fact that it only hurt when she applied pressure to it and not continuously informed her that it was probably sprained. Shortly before, Etrigan slammed his shoulder into her face, knocking her back and sending the brand flying over to where Bruce was sitting against the wall. The cat swiped at him once more before kicking him. Teakle leapt to her feet and repeatedly used her claws to attack the other demon until he caught her and threw her around. However, he failed to consider that cats always land on their feet, so when he threw her, she landed next to the brand. She caught it at the same moment as Bruce and kicked him away, sending 3 glass vials crashing to the ground and their contents scattering all around the man as he landed into a bookshelf. As Etrigan turned to see how Bruce was doing, Teakle paused to run to the side of the room where an oil lamp was burning and threw it at the floor beside Bruce, setting the liquid surrounding him on fire. After the two demons exchanged glares, the male pointed at the cat and growled, "There will be a reckoning," before sprinting into the fire to save Bruce, allowing the other demon to flee. After swiftly extinguishing the fires, they turned to face the open window and said, "She's gone just like the brand." Clarion sat in his bedroom by himself, gazing boredly at the various items that adorned his room. Crystal balls, demon-like masks, a few shrunken heads, miniature statues of monsters, and even some ancient alchemy charts that hung on the wall. His fingers repeatedly tapped the chair's arm as he waited for his dependable and well-known servant Teakle to bring him the brand. She had been gone for a few hours, but he knew she would be back in no time. The sound of scratching at his window caused his head to pop up. Talk about the devil, or should he say, the demon. He got up and went to the window of his bedroom, where he saw her hanging upside down, the brand in her mouth. "Oh, you've done well, Teakle," he said, reaching up to grab the brand before she transformed back into a cat and meowed as she fell onto the window sill. Naruto closed his eyes and said, "I see that your faith was not misplaced," as the boy entered the room. He was seated in the manor's spacious living room, which had once been dust-covered and unused. It wasn't very big, but it was the largest room in the house, so it was the ideal space for him. Or so his followers thought. The room didn't even look like a living room anymore, as the 5 cultists had taken out most of the furniture on one side and positioned a large armchair against the wall like a throne, while the other side still had some couches and chairs. Clarion raised an eyebrow when he noticed the 5 worshippers kneeling at the blonde's feet while he meditated in what appeared to be his throne. With his crimson eyes gazing intently into the boy's soul, Naruto opened his eyes and said, "Now that you have the brand, what will you do with it?" "That is exactly what I came to show you," the witch boy said with a sly smile. "Ancient Morgaine, I beg you, from what was one now do make two," he said, holding the brand up with both hands and closing his eyes. He could feel the ancient magic in the brand at work, but all that was visible was the red glow of the M on the front. The blonde demon tilted his head to the side and watched as his student attempted to impress him. Returning to Jason Blood's, Barbara sat on one of the chairs with her dress pulled up to her knees, squirming as Bruce cleaned her leg wound after the blood was removed. She noticed that it wasn't nearly as bad as she had initially believed. She could swear that someone had used a chainsaw to cut it, but now it looked much better. In addition, she discovered that her leg was sprained rather than broken. As Bruce dabbed at the blood that slowly trickled from some of the wounds, Jason approached with a crystal vial in his hand. "Here, this'll fix you right up," he said, nudging the other man aside. With his eyes closed, she watched as he removed the stopper and applied a fine dust-like powder to the wound slowly while chanting something in another language under his breath. To her amazement, the wound vanished and left no scar behind. He even applied the same treatment to her ankle, and she soon felt as though nothing had happened. "That is incredible." She gazed at the two men and said, "I'm amazed." Jason had a slight smile on his face, but Bruce didn't appear surprised at all, and she had no reason to doubt that he had known about this the entire time. "Is everything exactly as I believe it to be?" After a moment, she asked, "You know magic?" Jason turned around and said, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." Barbara blinked, thinking, "I've heard that before," but then she remembered that it was from Hamlet, and she had to read it for a project, but I was never able to decipher its meaning. Like a parent to a child, Bruce told her, "It means get up," adding, "We have a brand to find." Jason screamed and dropped the vial, which thumped to the floor as he gripped his head in agony. Bruce rushed to him and seized his shoulders, saying, "Jason." The man merely gripped both sides of his head and grunted in agony without responding. With a glowing red M in the center of his forehead, Etrigan materialized, phasing from the man's back like a ghost where he turned solid. "Jason?" the hero asked while looking at the man, then to the demon, "Etrigan?" The demon turned away without saying anything. "Etrigan," Bruce called again, saying, "Wait, Etrigan. There's a problem." The larger creature turned and gave him a gloomy look as he stepped forward and grabbed his shoulder. Etrigan said in a deep voice, "Nothing is wrong, my new master awaits." Etrigan jumped out the window and disappeared as the demon suddenly grabbed the man by the head and threw him aside, causing Barbara to run up to see how he was doing. "Don't you despise me?" He sat on a chair and played with the brand, refusing to look at the young witch boy, but Etrigan heard his new master speak as he stood in front of him. "Speak up, I order you," Clarion said as he stood and moved in front of him. "Yes, I despise you. But there's nothing you can do about it," the boy grinned. "No, not while I have this. You must follow my instructions exactly and cannot do anything else unless I tell you to. You get it?" Acting like a snobby rich boy, he asked. The demon merely gave a nod. "Good, now let's go have some fun. Mister, not to ask you a question, but is it prudent to give that boy access to a demon controlling device? Considering that you're, well?" Joseph had just returned from bribing their police friend, and Naruto glanced at him. He could see why the man was worried, but it was unnecessary. "Don't be alarmed because it will take more than a whore like LeFay's magic to control me." Naruto hummed from his seat. Magic was already a dying art in her time. The magic required to even hinder, let alone control, someone like me, has long since been destroyed. Thus, let the kid play and have fun with his toy. After all, humanity has been playing with that pitiful excuse of a demon for years. It is only appropriate that he should actually develop into such a thing. The blonde snapped, "But enough of such lowly subjects, tell me of the progress." Black Mask is cooperating, reluctantly I must add. Biggie's is kidnapping people to work in the mines, mostly homeless and the jobless, but his methods are questionable at best. Biggie's will soon outlive his usefulness. By then, I will no longer need him, so let him ruin it with bad choices, Naruto said, leaning back and closing his eyes. "Our other project a Euro. What about it?" "No one suspects a thing, sir." "All right. Good," Naruto grinned and said, "Keep working. Put that project on hold for the time being, and focus on the others." "What about the boy?" Joseph questioned. "What if?" The man stopped speaking when Naruto glanced at him and said, "If the little witch proves to be a nuisance in the future, then rest assured that I will personally destroy him along with that pet of his." "Master, The boy has left to go into the city. When Naruto opened his eyes, he saw one of the cultists bowing before him. The cultist, who was posing as a guard at the front door, would always inform the boy whenever he left the manor without him. He pondered to the man on his knees, "Yes, I am well aware of that, now be gone." Joseph had already left the manor with 2 of the cultists to tend to some business. While the other 3 were busy searching for possible recruits, the man hastily rose and departed, leaving him to his own thoughts. Naruto hummed as he sat in his chair, throne. He had nothing better to do right now and had no desire to sit around for much longer. Perhaps he would go see what the little witch was doing with Itrigan, the demon. Jason stood at the window, his hair now gray with age, and he turned to face the 2 heroes, pointing out the wrinkles that were beginning to appear. "It was the demon inside my body that kept me from aging for all these centuries," he said, "yet now I'm going to start displaying my age every day until..." Bruce firmly told him, "I'm not going to let that happen, Jason, that's not going to happen." "I won't either," Barbara said with a nod. "No, baby, you're staying here. Jason might need your assistance," Bruce said. When Jason coughed and his body weakened as he gradually returned to his actual age, the girl began to object but stopped. "All right, however, do you believe that you will be able to locate him?" "I have a feeling that Clarion won't be hard to find," Jason said with a frown. Naruto stood atop a building and gazed down at the streets below. Watching his student with a frown, he expected the boy to cause some chaos and destruction, but this was just pitiful. One would think that with a demon like Itrigan in control, Clarion would do something like rob a bank or steal valuables, or simply destroy a few buildings and kill some people. However, Clarion entered a movie theater, came out, and complained about how much he hated it before having Itrigan clean the place. A few seconds later, Clarion saw an ice cream truck and asked the demon to bring him some strawberry ice cream when there was none. He complained that there was nothing better than strawberry before he noticed a store named the Kirby Cake Company. "This is embarrassing," he thought to himself, feeling a little embarrassed about having instructed the brat below as a subway train halted above him on the elevated tracks. Clarion began to complain about the noise and insisted that Itrigan take action as Batman landed on a building nearer Clarion and Itrigan was compelled to destore an abandoned building. Naruto noticed a movement in the distance and recognized him.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.